Please take your seat, delegates. We will reconvene in less than a minute. Good afternoon. I hope you had the opportunity to have a good lunch or to enjoy some of the side events already programmed. Before continue with our considerations in item 3, we will return to item 2 on organizational matters, election of officers. This morning, when we consider item 2, I encourage members of the Bureau to continue consultations with the respective regional groups over lunch, so they will be ready with their nominations by then. I would like to return to this item now, and I open the floor for the outstanding nomination of the Latin America and Caribbean states. So I invite, I think it was St. Lucia, or who will take the floor? What is?
Okay.
Is Sao Tome?
So floor,
or I believe it's St. Lucia?
Floor 138.
138. Microphone is open. Please proceed, St. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm very happy to report that Latin America and the Caribbean states have nominated Ms. Aria St. Louis from Grenada to be the Substat Bureau, on the Substat Bureau. Aria St. Louis is currently the environmental specialist for the government of Grenada and head of the environmental division in the Ministry of Climate Resilience, the Environment and Renewable Energy. She serves as the technical focal point to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is CBD, the Biosafety Protocol, UNFCCC Adaptation Matters, and the Basel Convention. Her research and interests include assessment of the impact of climate change on island biodiversity, measuring biodiversity response to using ecosystem-based adaptation approaches to promote resilience. Her experience as a biologist spans marine, freshwater, and terrestrial ecosystems, including multidisciplinary research on commercially important fish species, endangered species, and monitoring indicator species. She has worked in the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Science at the University of Florida, as well as been attached to the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, DNA Profiling and Forensic Center. Chair, as you are aware, Grenada is not a party to the Nagoya Protocol, but as there are no items on the agenda for the Nagoya Protocol being considered at this meeting, I understood that we have a bit more time to identify a substitute. And we can come back to you with
Microphone to San Lucia, please. I think he was using the Sao Tome microphone.
Chair, would you like me to start all over?
No, just to finish. The interruption was just 3 seconds ago.
Okay. So, Chair, as you are aware, Grenada is not a party to the Nagoya Protocol. But as there are no item on the agenda for the Nagoya Protocol being considered at this meeting, I understood that we have a bit more time to identify a substitute, and we will do so before the end of this week. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, San Lucia, for the good news. So, seems we have complete names for the different members in all regions. So if there are no objections, may I take it that the subsidiary body wishes to elect the following nominees by acclamation. For the African states, the nominated candidate is Mr. Kenneth Yusef from Namibia. For the Asia Pacific states, the nominated candidate is Mr. Jahidul Kabir from Bangladesh. For the Eastern European states, the nominated candidate is Professor Taulant Bino of Albania. For the Latin American and Caribbean states, the nominated candidate is Ms. Aria San Luis of Grenada, in the understanding that the substitute for the Nagoya Protocol will be identified and elected later. For the Western European and other states, the nominated candidate is Mr. Scott Wilson of Canada, to be substituted by Mr. Niklaus Wagner of Switzerland for the Cartagena and Nagoya protocols. I see no objections, so it's so decided. The new Bureau members are elected, so I extend my congratulations to them, and I invite them to attend the Bureau meetings of SBSTA as observers to get familiar with the group and the works. With this, we now complete agenda item 2, so we go back to agenda item 3. As is regarding 3A, as you might remember, the last intervention from one of the observers from TNC made a specific proposal of language. So in order to respect our procedures, I will ask if there's any party raising your hand supporting the inclusion of language by the NGO, so we can consider on the debates. I see a hand in EU, and I thought it was also Kenya, and yeah. So there are at least 3 parties supporting, so this will be considered. With this, we close our deliberations on agenda item 3A, and now we move to 3B on mechanisms for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. As you know, in decision 15.6, the Conference of the Parties adopt an enhanced mechanism for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. In the same decision, it decided to conduct a global review of collective progress in the implementation of the framework, including the means of implementation based on national reports and, as appropriate, other sources of information. The Conference of the Parties requests that the subsidiary body on implementation develop the concrete procedures for this global review and request the subsidiary body, the SBSTA, advise at this 25 meeting to provide advice to the subsidiary body on implementation on relevant scientific, technical, and technological inputs that should inform the global Review. I have discussed this agenda item with the chair of the subsidiary body of implementation, and that body will be developing the concrete procedures for the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the framework at its next meeting, which will be after SBSTTA-25. While in line with the mandate from COP, SBSTTA-25 will be providing advice on the scientific, technical, and technological aspects. Thus, the advice provided under this agenda item will be provided to SBI for its consideration when it develops its recommendation. Now, I would like to invite the Secretariat to introduce the document from item 3B. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. For this agenda item, the Secretariat has prepared document CBD/SBSTTA-25/3, Scientific, Technical, and Technological Inputs that should inform the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This document provides a summary of possible elements of the global review of collective progress, which is being developed in accordance with Decision 15-6 of the Conference of the Parties. In that decision, the Conference of the Parties requested the Executive Secretary to compile views from parties on the concrete procedures for the global review, to support the subsidiary body on implementation in the development of these procedures, and to assist with this process, the Secretariat prepared a draft document that set out possible procedures for the global review and invited parties to submit views on the possible procedures contained in the document, as well as any other procedures for global review. 12 parties submitted views. The concrete procedures for global review will be considered by SBI. However, draft procedures are set out in document CBD/SBSTTA-25/3 to provide the full context for your discussion on the scientific, technical, and technological inputs for that review process. This document proposes content and key questions, including scientific, technical, and technological inputs for a global report on collective progress towards the implementation of the framework, including terms of reference for a scientific and technical advisory group for the preparation of a global report. As mentioned by the Chair, the document includes draft recommendations with elements to be provided to the subsidiary body on implementation for its consideration in developing the concrete procedures for global review. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. So I will invite you to be as concise as possible, as we've been doing in the morning, or even better. So please focus on essential points and submit the full text of your intervention to the Secretariat. I open the floor for comments on this document. I see Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The global review is a key element of the enhanced mechanism for planning, monitoring, and review adopted at COP15. The global review will be the main tool to help us keep track of the collective implementation of the global framework. It will examine the effects that action taken so far have resulted in and how this measures up to the progress needed to achieve the global framework. The global review process should also identify gaps and enable parties to work together to agree on steps necessary to ramp up action and support. SBI is mandated to develop the modalities of the global review. That will consist of several elements. We welcome inputs from SBSTTA on the global review in line with their mandate to provide scientific and technical advice to the SBI. Referring to the document under this agenda item, we have the following comments that will be supported by text proposals submitted in writing. We support the global report on implementation as one element of the global review process. The main focus and major content of the global report should be to assess parties' collective progress towards the framework, including towards each of the goals and targets based on information from national reports. We would also welcome the inclusion of a high-level summary of the most recent and relevant scientific and technical information on the state of and trends in biodiversity as part of the global report. The global report should be prepared under the guidance of SBI. SBSTTA should provide significant input to the high-level summary on the state and trends in biodiversity. We support the establishment of a scientific and technical advisory group under SBSTA that will facilitate SBSTA's input to the global implementation report. We see the need to make adjustments to the terms of reference to make clear that this group will be providing advice to SBSTA and that SBSTA in its. We also wonder if the group should be called an informal technical advisory group, similar to the group set up under the DSI workstream under negotiations of the global framework. This is an established format. The global review process is a new element adopted at COP15. The global report on implementation is a direct response to this process. We therefore would not support calling the report a GBO. The global report on implementation is a specific report tailored to the global review. It should provide us with a clear picture on how we are collectively doing on implementation and a short summary on the global status on biodiversity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Narwe, and I'm sorry that parties has 3 minutes, but currently it's set to 2 minutes. I hope technician can fix this, so don't feel bad if after 2 minutes it's close your mic. Now we'll give the floor to Mexico, followed by Japan and Spain.
Gracias, señor presidente. México considera.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We believe that this should have all the technical approaches that arise from the national reports, the results of the IPCC, and the information contained in previous global perspective on biodiversity. It is challenging when it comes to a report, and the time is short. We consider that it's pertinent to create an advisory body in order to conduct the drafting of said report. We likewise believe that the SBI and a close relationship with the SBSTTA is necessary in order to conduct this work. In relation to these documents, we do have some observations that we will present to you formally in writing. Thank you. Thank you, Mexico, and thank you for your brevity. I give the floor to Japan, then Spain, and then Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As it is the first time for CBD to conduct the global review, Japan considers it would be important that the most effective modality should be determined in consideration of our experience of GBOs, of which the modality was adopted at COP2. It would be also important to ensure the synergies with the IPBES processes, in particular, the second global assessment. Therefore, Japan considers it would be quite important to establish relevant mechanism to coordinate with the IPBES processes without any duplications in relation to, but not limited to, the establishment of the advisory body. While we are aware that some of the matters should be discussed at SBI rather than at this meeting. It is also suggested to learn from other relevant MEA processes, such as the global stock taking, which is ongoing process at UNFCCC for more effective implementation. As a global review is a review of collective progress in the implementation of the GBF, Japan considers that primary work on the global review should be conducted based on the national reports. Regarding the membership of the advisory body, we were not able to identify the term of the membership. We consider it should be important to set clear term as well as other necessary guidance on the membership of the committee. This may not be needless to be mentioned. This agenda item is closely related to the discussion at SBI, and Japan considers it would be efficient for SBSTA to focus to scientific and technical consideration, which will be support successful discussion at SBI. On another note, The Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol on Liability and Redress was adopted at the 5th meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol, COP5, held in Aichi, Nagoya, Japan, on 15th October 2010. Today marks the 13th anniversary of its adoption. The supplementary protocol aims to conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity by providing international rules and procedures in the field of liability and redress related to living modified organisms. Although such supreme objective of the legal instrument, the current number of the parties is still limited, and it is only 54. As one of the parties which has their names of the cities found in the name of the protocol, Japan would like to remind and encourage all parties for further cooperation, the implementation of the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol on the occasion of its anniversary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan, and thank you for the reminder of the anniversary. Now, doy la palabra a España.
Now Spain has the floor, and then Brazil, then Cameroon. Thank you, Chair. Spain reiterates the vision and information provided in response of the European Union to Notification 22369, in which it was stressed that the global review has to be considered as a process, which would be composed of 4 phases. 1, information gathering. 2, technical dialogue. 3, political phase. And 4, response phase. In this regard, Spain considers it important to define the role and responsibility in the global review procedures, which is a process that should be led by the parties with the support of the subsidiary bodies and the Secretariat, ensuring the legitimacy of its results, both at the technical and political levels. We therefore welcome the discussion and the terms of reference proposed in the note prepared by the Secretariat in document 25/3. We consider it of crucial importance to ensure the legitimacy of its conclusions, especially among parties, both at the technical and political level. The Secretariat's note foresees the creation of an advisory committee working under the overall supervision of the SBSTTA Bureau. However, we would like the Secretariat to provide us with more information on the committee, its functions, and its membership. We would like the preliminary draft to further develop concrete actions to integrate participation and dialogue with all stakeholders. Therefore, we make textual suggestions to allow for the participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, women, youth, civil society organizations, academia, the private and financial sectors, and stakeholders from all other relevant sectors in paragraphs 3.1i and 5, this to ensure successful implementation. We would also like to stress that the global review process should be a party-driven process and not simply a standalone report. In this regard, we consider it important to clearly indicate the sources of information to be taken into account in the elaboration of the global report, which is why we would like to introduce a reference to all relevant findings from EPFES and other sources, which we have included in our amendment proposals in paragraphs 1 and 3 of the draft recommendation. We welcome the proposal for high-level discussions and consider that the design of the concrete procedures of the global review should provide a basis for further action and relevant responses. We would like the process to be inclusive also with regard to other relevant multilateral environmental agreements where appropriate, and to this end, the Secretariat should seek the views and opinions of the Secretariats of these agreements in relation to this global review process and their role in it. Finally, we request a number of improvements to Annex 2 on the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel, paragraph 4. We have written to the Secretariat our proposed amendments. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Spain. Now Brazil has the floor, and then Cameroon, and then Switzerland.
We take this opportunity to provide some preliminary comments on the potential structure of the global report as described in section 3 of document 25/3. As a cross-cutting concern, we believe that previous editions of the Global Biodiversity Outlook have often neglected the specific challenges and circumstances faced by developing countries, thus undermining the sense of ownership of the review of implementation of the Convention. Therefore, we would highlight the need to consider those specific challenges and circumstances to the different sections and chapters of the proposed global report. The global report should also consider the 3 objectives of the Convention in a balanced manner. Regarding question 2 and the corresponding section 3, we would stress that potential options for actions need to be identified on a flexible and non-prescriptive basis to ensure the non-intrusive nature of the mechanisms for planning, monitoring, reviewing, as agreed upon under COP15 decision 15/6. Furthermore, we are of the view that section 4 is out of the mandate of the Convention, as is not the Convention's role to assess implementation of other MEAs. We also believe that the report must include a dedicated section on means of implementation to assess its provision to developing countries, and we would request the Executive Secretary to revise the aforementioned sections accordingly. Regarding the potential sources of scientific and technical inputs, as presented in paragraph 3 of the proposed draft resolution, Brazil would further stress the need to prioritize intergovernmentally reviewed and adopted assessments, in particular relevant summaries for policymakers from IPBES, as they provide a balanced approach towards the best available scientific evidence and policy relevant considerations. While we acknowledge the work of the IPCC, we understand not all IPCC reports relate to topics under review by the Convention. Moreover, we struggle to understand the references to the International Resource Panel, which is not an intergovernmental platform like IPBES and IPCC. We'd also recommend caution regarding the use of information drawn on component and complementary indicators, as they are of a voluntary nature and should not prejudge which actions are to be undertaken by parties. Furthermore, we understand that the global review of collective progress is a party-driven process, and we would like to highlight the need to ensure the transparency and inclusivity of the global review of progress in all its stages. Thus, we would request the Executive Secretary to submit a draft version of the global report to peer review by contracting parties prior to its finalization. We will be submitting our comments in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Now I'll give the floor to Cameroon, followed by Switzerland and Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cameroon is speaking on behalf of the African Group. Africa welcomed the Secretariat note on the scientific, technical, and technological inputs that should inform the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In this respect, the completion of a global review requires a monitoring framework with specific, measurable, achievable, and time-bound indicators. We recognize the importance of the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook as periodic reports of on biological biodiversity, and welcome the process to consider how to conduct a global review to collective progress in the implementation of the framework based on national reports and, as appropriate, other source of information. In the view of the evolution of the content of the 5 previous GBO, we in fact have evolved over time according to the needs of the Convention and the request of the COP. We believe that continuing the Global Biodiversity Outlook branding and using this name for the global report should be not the major concern. However, there is a dire need to ensure that the content and structure of the outlook is relevant and coherent with the GBF and also in accordance with its mechanism for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. In addition, inclusive and transparent modalities should be established to ensure parties' contribution to the report. Africa welcomed the inclusion of Section 5 in the proposed structure, which should address, among other things, the strategic aspect of means of implementation as prescribed on Section I as implementation and support mechanism and enabling condition of the GBF. In our understanding that the extent to which developing countries implement their action to the GBF is highly dependent on the resources provided by developed countries. In that regard, Africa calls for an in-depth examination of this issue that will address the review of the timeliness, adequacy, and relevancy of resource provided, including finance, capacity buildings, and technological transfer. This will address the major concern expressed by some parties on the need to include a detailed analysis of adequacy, predictability, accessibility of the means of implementation for developing countries. Also, Africa welcomed the establishment of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Group for the preparation of the global report on collective progress in the implementation of the GBF, whose collaboration with the two subsidiary bodies, SBSTTA and SBI, deserve further clarification with regard to the information presented in Section 2,
Please
Para
conclude,
12,
Cameroon.
and Section 5, Para 5 on the Secretariat note. Details of our contribution will be said in the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. I remind parties to maintain under the 3 minutes interventions. Now I'll give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Germany and the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Switzerland considers the global review of collective progress to be a critical element of the multidimensional approach to planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. Given the mandates to SBI to provide advice on the concrete procedures of the global review and the mandate to Substat to give scientific inputs, it is our expectation that the concrete elements of the procedures will be discussed at SBI 4 in a comprehensive way, and that the discussion in this meeting focus on scientific inputs. With this in mind, we consider the pre-session document for this item to be a good basis for discussion, as the proposed recommendations focus on the parts of the global review that require scientific input. However, we would like to highlight the following proposed changes. Regarding paragraph 1 on the global report, in line with Norway, Switzerland is of the view that the report should be clearly distinguished from the previous GBOs. In our view, it should include the following main elements. The first element should provide an overview of the state of and trends in biodiversity based on scientific assessments, including from IPBES. A second and main element should analyze collective progress based on the national reports by parties. The third element should analyze the contributions made by other biodiversity-related conventions. And a last element of the report should contain a concluding element addressing gaps and challenging in the implementation. Regarding paragraph 3, Mr. Chair, on sources of the global report. Similar to Spain, we suggest to mention the IPBES assessments and deliverables more prominently with a separate subparagraph to underline its importance and relevance. On subparagraph F, we suggest to add databases, as in our view, databases such as GBIF can be valuable sources for the report. Furthermore, we suggest to add also information by biodiversity-related conventions as a source. The Bern 3 conference that will take place in January 2024 and is organized by UNEP will bring together parties from biodiversity-related conventions to discuss cooperation for the implementation of the GBF. The outcomes of Bern 3 might provide conclusions on how the MEAs can contribute to the global report and to the global review in general. Regarding paragraph 4, on the proposed advisory group, in principle, Switzerland supports a time-bound advisory group as it can contribute to increase party oversight over the development of the report and thereby also increase its legitimacy and ownership by parties. However, there are several open questions regarding the proposed terms of references for the advisory group, including on its roles and tasks. And finally, Mr. Chair, on paragraph 6 and 7 regarding IPBES, We have some suggested additions to welcome all relevant IPES assessments and also to stress their importance as inputs to the global review process. We will hand in the proposed changes in writing. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. And apologies, Cameron, I didn't recall correctly that you were speaking on behalf of the region, on your region. Now I'll give the floor to Russian Federation, followed by the United Kingdom and Netherlands.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Мы, несомненно, признаем важность подготовки глобального отчета и поддерживаем участие в НТТК в процессе подготовки такого отчета. Прежде всего.
Thank you, Chair. We certainly approve the global review and also support the proposed contents. But we have some comments to the proposed recommendations, questions, and we don't quite understand paragraph 3 points A and B. What are the principal differences there? Does it mean that we have a separate point B, that we override the limits of national reports? We think that this is not correct. Shouldn't be so, as other parties already mentioned. This report should be the report of the parties of the convention. And we feel that everything which is written in point B has been reflected in point A. So we would like to suggest that point B be excluded. Also, some countries already mentioned that in the list of information sources that should be used for global report, to contain a number of indicators which are common for the reports on sustainable development. We have already taken some indicators directly from there, and also to look at the reports from other biodiversity-related conventions. We are satisfied to see the development of work inside IPES, maturing the organization, the global scope of that work. So we are not sure that that would be expedient to continue to develop the global biodiversity outlook in its former format. And we think that the resources to be directed from Secretariat to that task would not be really substantiated. We think that that should be decided by COP and proposed by IPES. If this work is to continue, the document should be titled in another way. We have some questions on paragraph 2 and 3 on how this advisory group, the proposed advisory group, be formed. It is written there that this advisory group would be formed by the governments. Does it mean that the government would nominate also representatives from the youth, the indigenous peoples, the academia in the advisory group? This is not exactly the practice that we support and have been using. So we would look into the terms of reference for that advisory group, but on the whole, we feel that advisory group is instrumental. Thank you.
Now I'll give the floor to United Kingdom, followed by Netherlands and Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. A global review process which is evidence-based, participatory, party-driven, and with clear timelines, roles, and responsibilities is fundamental to the achievement of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and its goals and targets. The UK would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the note, including the draft recommendation to SBI on the concrete procedures for the global review. It is a good basis for discussion. We strongly support a global report of collective progress as a key input to the global review process. The report should clearly demonstrate our collective progress against each goal and target and any gaps in implementation to allow COP17 and COP19 to agree clear recommendations on what further action may be needed to address any potential gaps. It should be based on a range of best available evidence and information sources, but the recommendation does not need to list all the possible sources. We suggest the list included in the draft recommendation is sufficient. We also support establishing an ad hoc scientific and technical advisory group to assist with the preparation of the global report, and also to provide other relevant technical and scientific inputs to the global review process. An advisory group composed of experts nominated by parties, but also observers, will ensure that both the global report and the global review process are scientifically sound and have the necessary party oversight. We suggest the global report and review process could be further supported by a light-touch technical dialogue between parties, experts, and stakeholders to help increase parties' understanding of the technical inputs, analysis, and findings that underpin the global report and global review process. The roles and responsibilities of these bodies and their relationship with SBSTA and SBI should be clearly set out. Distinguished delegates, it is the subsidiary body on implementation which has been mandated to develop the concrete procedures for the global review of collective progress. That said, we feel we can all agree that the global review process in its entirety, not just its particular elements, should be informed by the best available evidence and science, including that provided by IPBES assessments. We therefore believe that SBSTA, the Technical Advisory Group, and the Technical Dialogue have an important role to play in providing scientific, technical, and technological advice on not just the global report, but also the other elements of the global review process as appropriate. Time is not on our side for developing the concrete procedures. The more concrete progress we can make here, the stronger foundation we will have for our discussion on this critical issue at SBI in May next year. We have provided our proposed amendments to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, UK. Now I'll give the floor to Netherlands, followed by Belgium and New Zealand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Netherlands would like to highlight the importance of a phased approach to the global review, wherein the review is transparent, scientifically supported, and inclusive. In this regard, we support the position of the EU. As such, the Netherlands supports the establishment of the Technical Advisory Group, as well as the Scientific Committee, to ensure that relevant scientific expertise is available to assess progress of the review. The Netherlands also stresses that the roles and respective responsibilities of these two bodies should be clear. The Netherlands want to highlight the importance to include various information sources in the global review process, including national reports, IPBES assessments, and inputs from different multilateral environmental agreements to fully reflect different perspectives and available data on the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Finally, the Netherlands stresses the importance to include various stakeholders as well as right holders in the review process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Netherlands. I'll give the floor to Belgium, followed by New Zealand and Sweden. Microphone to Belgium, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start again. Belgium agrees with the intervention of several parties before us, like Norway, Spain, Brazil, and Cameroon, on the mention that the global review is a process. And we agree also with our intervention from the Netherlands and some other EU countries. We are of the opinion that paragraph 6 of the draft recommendation with regards to welcome decision of IPBES is better placed in the preamble. We also agree with the proposal from Spain and Switzerland on the insertion of an additional paragraph to stress the importance of the rolling work program of IPBES for the global review. With regards to the Scientific and Technical Advisory Group, mentioned in the draft decisions or recommendations, we agree with this establishment of this group, but we are of the opinion that it should be a time-bound ad hoc advisory group for the global review to avoid confusion with the informal advisory group for technical and scientific cooperation mentioned in COP decision 15/8. With regards to the annex that is talking about the mandate of this ad hoc advisory group, it needs some improvement, like Russia has mentioned, on who can nominate participants, and we will give some wording for that. We also would like to add a paragraph on the honorarium of the members of this group and propose to use the wording already mentioned in decision COP/15/8, Annex 3, paragraph 12. We will submit our comments in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium. Now I'll give the floor to Sweden, followed by France and Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sweden takes note of document Subsidiary-25 on scientific, technical and technological inputs that should inform the global review on collective progress. For Sweden, as for others, it is important to consider the global review of collective progress as a process that includes different stages and not only a report of collective progress. The global review process should include an information gathering phase that will provide inputs for a global review report, a technical dialogue phase to anchor and discuss the findings of the information gathering phase, a political phase to elevate the findings of the global review, and to offer appropriate political recognition of the status of collective progress as well as of required actions for its achievement of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as a response phase to improve implementation on national level. The global review process should be a party-led process, and parties must have opportunity to review a global report. And SBSTTA and SBI need to be able to provide advice within their respective mandates. Sweden is of the view that the global review report should include a summary of the state of biodiversity based on available reports by IPBES, the IPCC, local biodiversity outlooks, and other relevant reports of MEAs and other appropriate peer-reviewed scientific sources. A review of collective progress towards the goals and targets of the GBF based on national reports, the headline indicators and binary indicator questions, as well as progress towards the implementation of sections C, I, J, and K of the framework. A conclusion exploring options for addressing any identified gaps and challenges in the implementation, including a summary of gaps and data and knowledge. Regarding the contribution of IPBES, we note that the document is not referring to all important existing and upcoming IPBES deliverables in the related section. We therefore propose to consider them in the recommendation. Sweden would welcome the global report would also address synergies with other relevant conventions and processes, including the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the results of the Bern Conference on cooperation among biodiversity-related conventions for the implementation of the GBF and its follow-up process. Contributions by non-state actors should also be considered. These should highlight contributions from indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and youth. Sweden supports the establishment of a time-bound, ad hoc scientific technological advisory group, including experts nominated by parties and relevant observers to support the information gathering phase. We have further recommendations for amendments that we will provide in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sweden. So I've been listening to many comments on the work needed on the recommendation and also in the terms of reference. So we will need to work on this. Having said that, I still have a long list of speakers, and we have for this afternoon the intention to deal with 3 documents. Seems there's a lot of work to do. So we all recognize this is very important. We all recognize we need to work with the SBI. We need to do our part. This is the connection with SBI for this mechanism. So maybe if your following interventions go straight to points on the recommendation on the terms of reference, in the sense that we will need to very probably to establish a contact group to work to save time on that and keep very concrete your interventions. Now I'll give the floor to France, Colombia, and followed by China as well. France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
France wants to underline the importance of this discussion on scientific and technical issues that should be taken into account within the monitoring framework of Kunming-Montreal. The implementation for France must be supported by science. We welcome the quality of this paper and this recommendation, and we welcome the fact that its implementation is an important phase of this process. As such, the inclusion of the evaluation of LIBLE of the IPBES is crucial. We take note of all the recommendations that have been made, but we would like to have past evaluation included. We believe that the previous works on the platform are just as relevant. We welcome the proposal to have a consultative committee in order to include the inclusion of parties in the drafting of the global review in a balanced way. We believe that IPBES should contribute to it. We also align ourselves to Netherlands and Spain on non-state actors. We would send you our comments by email. Thank you.
Colombia, seguido de China y Turquía.
It will be Colombia, China, and then Turkey. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On behalf of Colombia, I would like to present the following considerations regarding 3B. First of all, the global framework reports should also encompass all the main actors, academia, and the IPLCs, as long as making sure that that information is effectively included by all parties in their national reporting. We should use platforms that have been used before, like CHM, in order to establish an appropriate interface. CHM, Panorama, IPSAT, among other platforms, and it will be necessary to coordinate different initiatives in order to avoid redundancy and duplicate efforts regarding the national report. That will be a major source of information regarding the collective advancements that we have had. That should include also what the stakeholders are implementing global framework and assess all the efforts in order to reduce poverty and to meet the goals that we have all agreed upon. Regarding the final question, we would have a double approach there, a two-pronged approach that will be related to IP and trade. We also believe it is pertinent that reporting take into account multilateral stakeholders. Colombia requests that the new date for the 7th report is April 2026, so all parties have enough time in order to conduct said reporting. Regarding collaborations of the IPBES to the global framework, they should take into account the second regarding the SBI and the technical and technological advisory body. We would have to mobilize resources, and we need more clear. We need some more definition on that, as it's not clear for Colombia, and we need to make sure that the other comments will be sent to the Secretariat via writing. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Colombia. We now give the floor to China, followed by Turkey and Canada. Thank you very much.
当前的认可全球报告评估 GBF 目标
Sorry, China, but I believe there is no translation into English.
和促进实施中所发挥的重要作用，强调。Sorry.
There is no translation.
There is no translation.
Yes, please stop and they start again.
Yes, the Chinese delegate can continue. Please, the Chinese delegate can start speaking.
No.
Chinese interpreter standing by. Chinese speaker can start. Thank you.
当前的建议案文是全球审查机制制定的良好基础。中方欢迎设立集体执行进度全球报告的科学和技术咨询小组。
Sorry, please ask her to start over again. Sorry. Yes, just starting one last time. It should be okay. Please tell the Chinese delegate to restart again. Sorry about that. Thank you, the President. Thank you for your patience. It's okay. Standing by. No issue from now on. Chinese, thank you for everyone. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for the Secretary's work. Right now, I think the recommendation for this global review, I think we have a good foundation right now. I think this scientific and technical, and I think their group, we approve. They are work on assessing the GBF, and they've done a good work. I think this process needs to respect every country's authority and should be regional driven. I think this is global and this is accessible and transparent, and it's fast, and it should be practical as a guidance. We want this global review should be focused on the action. We need to learn and understand from one another, finding the obstacles, finding better solutions, and to achieve GBF goals together. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the chairman.
Difficulties. Now we'll give the floor to Turkey, followed by Canada and Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the components of the global review, our suggestions is for the support of the activities to include scientific analysis of emerging issues and trends that may impact biodiversity conservation and sustainable use for future. This analysis can help identify new challenges and opportunities that should be addressed to effectively implement GBF. It should consider factors such as climate change, technological advancements, land use changes, and socioeconomic developments. In a similar manner, we support the consideration the need for updated targets and indicators to reflect the evolving understanding of biodiversity conservation and the changing context, as it can help ensure that the GBF remains relevant and responsive to new challenges and scientific knowledge. Considering global report mentioned in the document, indeed, it raises important concerns that deserve further consideration. The report should fully align with the specific goals and objectives set forth in this GBF. The GBF represents a new and ambitious phase in global biodiversity conservation efforts. It introduces specific targets and goals that go beyond the previous strategic plans for biodiversity. Therefore, the global report should address these new objectives and priorities. To effectively track progress toward the GBF goals, it is crucial to prioritize the availability of comprehensive and up-to-date data. This includes data on species populations, habitat conservation, ecosystem health, and other relevant indicators. The report should ensure that these data sources are not only accessible, but also scientifically robust. GBF emphasizes transformative change in how we interact with and conserve biodiversity. It focuses on addressing the underlying drivers of biodiversity loss, such as land use change, climate change, and sustainable consumption and production patterns. That's why the global report must align with these objectives and highlight efforts to address these drivers. The report should not only assess the current state of biodiversity, but also address the evolving challenges and opportunities that will shape conservation efforts in the future. We will send our comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Canada, followed by Argentina and the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would first like to thank the CBD Secretariat for their work in preparing this meeting document. We believe it represents well the views expressed in response to notification 2023-069 and provides all of the key elements needed for the Subsidiary draft recommendation. However, we believe that it will be important for the draft recommendation to remain within the scope mandated by COP15 Decision 15/6 to provide advice on relevant scientific, technical, and technological inputs that should inform the global review. To be clear, we think there is a danger in trying to make the global review report do too much and lose track of its focus, which in our opinion is to review our collective progress in implementing the KMGBF. To this end, Canada will be proposing some amendments to the recommendation text, calling for SBI to further review the recommendation text from SBSTA to ensure alignment with the broader recommendation on procedures for the global review. We support a global review that takes into account the best available science and information from all relevant sources, including Indigenous knowledge gathered with the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. And we will have some additions to the draft recommendation to reflect this important inclusion. In terms of the scope of the global report, we believe that the focus of the report, as I said earlier, should be first and foremost on meeting the 2030 targets and the 2030 mission, as stated by Norway and Switzerland as well. This will also help us to ensure that we address the concerns expressed by some parties regarding scope and focus, in particular, the concerns expressed here today about reviewing progress on implementing our collective commitments on the means of implementation, which will do, in our view, will be duly covered by reporting on Goal D and targets 19 and 20. Canada does not believe that the report should focus on providing a broader assessment of the status or trends of global biodiversity, given that this is an area of work that has and will continue to be covered as part of the IPBES work, as well as the Global Environment Outlook, and therefore would represent a duplication of efforts if undertaken by the CBD. We share the view of Japan on the need for better coordination between IPBES and the CBD. With regards to the establishment in terms of reference for the advisory group, Canada supports the establishment of this group as a way of helping to ensure that the report is a party-driven process and as a means of supporting SBSTA in providing advice to SBI, recognizing the responsibility of providing the report on implementation fundamentally falls to the SBI, and that any work done by SBSTA should feed into that process. Canada's of the view that it should not be the responsibility of the advisory group to suggest new sources of information or input for the report, but rather synthesize and assess the information in the sources listed by parties in the present recommendation. Finally, like the distinguished delegates from Spain, the UK, and others, we believe that observer organizations, in particular organizations representing the distinct views and insights of underrepresented groups, such as Indigenous peoples, women, and youth, should also have the opportunity to nominate experts to participate in the advisory group. Specific textual changes will be forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada, and thank you for the reminder to keep under the mandate from the COP. We should resist the temptation to go beyond. This is a bridge between SBSTA and SBI, and there is a role of SBI to define a number of elements. We should provide advice on the technical elements. for them best to use and make the decisions according to COP mandate. And I also invite you to maintain to the time allocated for parties. Ahora doy la palabra a la...
I now give the floor to Argentina, followed by EU and then Australia. Thank you, Mr. President. As Argentina has always pointed out, implementation has pretty much been the Achilles heel of the Convention on Biological Diversity. For this reason, the implementation of an efficient science-based collective progress review process is paramount to achieve the objectives and targets of Kunming-Montreal Global Framework. In this regard, Argentina has suggestions, 5 suggestions for the scientific, technical, and technological inputs for the global review process as contained in document CBD-SBSTTA-25/3. First, Argentina considers that global reports should be mainly based on the national reports and on scientific and technological evidence that has been considered by the SBSTTA. Second, Argentina considers appropriate the proposal to prepare a global report that gathers other scientific inputs for the global review and which could keep the name of Global Diversity Outlook. Third, Argentina favors a leading role as the SBSTTA in the elaboration and making of the global report. We do take note of the proposed structure, and we consider that the SBSTTA should make detailed consideration of the content in key questions. We kindly and respectfully request also that the global report be reviewed by the subsidiary body prior to the submission of the global review of collective progress. Fourth, Argentina supports the creation of the Scientific Technical Advisory Group in order to assist SBSTTA in the task of preparing the global report. We consider, as has been here exposed by many other delegations, that in order to avoid duplicated work being carried out, for example, IPBES, and we therefore recommend removing the work with models and scenarios from its mandate. Finally, fifth, last and not least, and as it was mentioned by Colombia, the African group, and Canada and many other colleagues, Argentina knows that it is essential that the inputs for the global review of collective progress assess the mobilization of resources, particularly the provision of means of implementation from developed to developing countries. We send our comments to the document in writing. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Argentina. Now I give the floor to EU, followed by Australia and then Côte d'Ivoire.
Everyone, the EU would like to thank the Executive Secretary for the draft document on the concrete procedures for the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to be conducted by the COP at its 17th and 19th meeting. Conscious of the time, the EU will not repeat what has already been said by various parties and would strongly support 2 points in particular. First, to ensure the active engagement in the global review of biodiversity-related conventions and other relevant multilateral environmental agreements and processes at global, regional, and sub-regional levels, in particular through the Bern process. Second, when preparing the global report, to use all relevant sources at global, regional, and sub-regional levels, and in particular, the latest assessment from the IPBES. The EU is convinced that the new procedures and contents to be adopted at SBI will ensure the delivery of a substantially improved and robust evidence-based inclusive global review of implementation of collective progress in the implementation of the GBF. Sorry, it's quite long sentence. The EU supports the establishment of a scientific and technical advisory group to assist Substa and stands ready to actively contribute to the provision of scientific, technical and technological inputs for its preparation. We support the changes of the recommendation and annex as proposed in the Vilm report and will provide them in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. Now, I give the floor to Australia, followed by Cote d'Ivoire and South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. Australia strongly supports the need for robust monitoring, reporting and review, while acknowledging the reporting challenges faced by many developing country parties, particularly small island developing states and least developed countries. Australia welcomes the approach of reporting and reviewing collective progress, with reporting to COP17 and COP19. We wish to see a robust scientific, technical and technological basis for the review, drawing on the best available information and working with existing national reporting processes to avoid undue reporting burden. Australia supports the proposed scientific, technical and technological inputs to the global report, which will inform the global review, while importantly respecting the relevant mandates of each of the subsidiary bodies. We support the establishment of a scientific and technical advisory group for the assurance that the science and technical aspects of the global report are adequately addressed, and also to ensure a party-led process, which will need defined roles and responsibilities to avoid duplicating effort. Australia proposes 2 minor text edits in paragraph 5 to clarify the reference to the advisory group, and in paragraph 6 to clarify the reference to the IPBES 10 outcomes. We'll submit these proposed amendments directly to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. I've been told that DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, has been asking for the floor many times, but unfortunately do not appear in the system. So I'll give the floor to DRC, and then we will continue with Cote d'Ivoire and then South Africa. So DRC, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. The DRC Congo is supporting the declaration by Cameroon on behalf of the African group. We support the idea of keeping the title Global Biodiversity Outlook. This allows us to have a projection towards the future, which is directly or indirectly a tool for our advocacy with the various partners, ensuring more resource mobilization. The global report should be structured based on the content of the GBF and reflect collective progress towards the realization of the mission and the target of the framework. The report requires a balance based on justice and equity with regard to the membership of the consultative group. Relevant strategy should be put in place to ensure that this will be endorsed and that there will be an ownership by the various stakeholders. The Montreal Framework recognized the role played by the local communities and indigenous people as a sound source of information. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you, DRC, and I'm sorry for this technical issue, but maybe if somebody let us know, we can give them the space since the system is not working properly. Now I'll give the floor to Cote d'Ivoire, followed by South Africa and Germany. And we need to move on. We have 2 documents more for this afternoon session, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Côte d'Ivoire supports the proposal presented by Cameroon on behalf of the Africa Group and welcomes the document, which is a sound basis for our discussion. We wish to share the following observations. With regard to the name of the report, Côte d'Ivoire wishes to highlight that the global report or version number 1 and of the number 5 that is available now has evolved over time. However, the content has evolved, but the name hasn't changed. What is our goal? Is it a global stocktaking of biodiversity? How shall we proceed in this regard? The content and the methodology alone are relevant regardless of the title. The goal and the means to reach our goal are key. Therefore, we think that the name is okay. Ivory Coast wishes to highlight the need for an alignment with the heading of the global report in all the documents that are submitted for our analysis. At the level of the recommendations concerning item 29/3, we think that the point C should be changed and that the paragraph should be put at the first stage. Therefore, the global outlook on the environment should be put in paragraph C in order to keep the related evaluations of this paragraph. In paragraph 4, we think that the consultative group, the advisory group, should be created to provide advice to SBSTTA, and that in paragraph 5, the same group should support the work developed by the subsidiary body to the SBI. Both paragraphs should thus be reviewed, I mean the number 4 and number 5. These are the observations that I wanted to share with you. Thank you, Chair.
Now I'll give the floor to South Africa, followed by Germany and New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa supports the statement made by Cameroon on behalf of Africa. South Africa supports elements of the draft recommendations and also supports the suggestion to separate the Global Review Report from the Global Biodiversity Outlook. The Global Biodiversity Outlook remains the monitoring tool that gives us the outlook on the state of biodiversity on the ground, more of a global inventory, whilst the Global Review assesses the effectiveness of our performance, tools, and resources to change the status quo of biodiversity. The Global Biodiversity Outlook should therefore serve as a source of information amongst other sources, including global analysis, national reports, etc., for the global review process. It is also important to note that a successful review or evaluation process depends on the availability and quality of data collected. If the outcomes of the global review indicate that we have performed dismally or excellently as a collective, the evidence of that should be seen through the Global Outlook report, whether it's painting a positive or negative state of biodiversity. With regards to the global review, there will be a midterm review or evaluation at COP17 on what we did achieve. This should focus on the extent to which the GBF is being implemented and the extent to which tools and resources have been made available and are being utilized for the implementation of the GBF. In addition, relevant evaluation questions should be developed to assess whether the GBF's operational mechanisms support the achievement of the objectives or not, and if not, why. Based on the outcomes of the midterm review, the COP would then make recommendations to enhance and accelerate implementation where needed. Furthermore, by COP19, focus would be on global impact review to look more on what impact has the GBF had towards the 2050 vision and its goals. Also assessing the effectiveness of the GBF, implementation tools, and commensurate resources towards the 2050 vision and its goals. Impact evaluation questions would need to be developed in this regard to guide the review or evaluation process. The outcomes of this evaluation is what would inter alia inform the next generation of strategies or frameworks of the convention. We will submit our comments in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Now I'll give the floor to Germany, followed by New Zealand and the representative of IPLCs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like many other parties have mentioned before, Germany is of the view that the global review of progress in the implementation of the GBF should be a process with different phases rather than a standalone document such as the GBO. I will try to keep it short and stress that the inputs to the global review should feed into this process and include the following sources which are not yet represented adequately. First, assessments, reports, and other deliverables of IPBES. Second, reports from voluntary country reviews. Third, information on non-state actor commitments, including disaggregated information on contributions from IPLCs, women and youth. Fourth and last, relevant information on implementation from biodiversity-related conventions and other MEAs. We have more comments on the concrete structure of the report, which we will hand in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Germany. Now I give the floor to New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Chair. New Zealand considers it vital that any global review report or technical synthesis produced under SBSTA should be a trusted and credible input to the further stages of the global review to be conducted under the SBI and COP. For this reason, in paragraph 1, we can support the idea of a global review report as part of the scientific and technical assessment process. However, if this report is to be produced by SBSTA, we think its scope needs to take into account the different roles of SBSTA and SBI in the global review procedures. In New Zealand's view, the role of SBSTA will be to oversee the information gathering and technical information phase of the global review. For example, including an information gathering stage with all inputs to be available to all parties and an analytical stage involving consideration and synthesis of inputs. So for this reason, we would also support the proposed technical dialogue suggested by the UK. A summary report, though, on the collective progress and implementation, which could take into account the technical synthesis produced by SBSTA, however, might be best produced by SBI. Putting aside the issue of these different roles, we have the following suggestions for the draft recommendation. New Zealand agrees that the paragraph, with others, that the paragraph 1 chapeau should make it clearer that the global review report will focus on reviewing collective progress against the Kunming-Montreal GBF, rather than focus on providing a progress report on the status and trends of biodiversity. In paragraphs 1A and B, we support the stated focus on assessing progress against each global target, but we suggest that we also include the 2030 mission and Section C of the KMGBF on cross-cutting considerations. In the same vein, as proposed by Canada, we think that the report should include the contribution of Indigenous knowledge with free, prior, informed consent. In addition, New Zealand, in addition to the status and trends in biodiversity, New Zealand suggests that we should also include the impacts of drivers and policy interventions on biodiversity and ecosystem services to further support the policy relevance of the final global report and its ability to inform the next stages of the global review. This is because it will be important that the assessment of progress should include both the outputs of parties' efforts, such as their actions, as well as the outcomes and the effectiveness of their interventions against each target. So for this reason, we also support inclusion of models and scenarios. In relation to paragraph 4 and whether we need an advisory group, we think this proposal needs further discussion amongst parties. An alternative approach might be for a technical consideration by parties of all the sources of input with a summary synthesis report produced by a pair of co-facilitators. So we think we should discuss further what is the intended scope and purpose of the global review report and how it is best produced. We have further similar comments on the annex, and we look forward to engaging on this further. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. With this, we finish with requests from parties. I have a request from IPLCs, IUCN, women and youth. And with this, I'll close the list in order to be quick and go straight to the establishment of a contact group. I hear many comments on different elements for the recommendations and also for the annex with the terms of reference. So we should go straight to that. So I ask the speakers to be very succinct. I'll give the floor to IPLCs, 225, followed by IUCN and women.
The International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity welcomes the document CBD-SBSTTA-25/3 for the guidance provided with respect to the scientific, technical, and technological inputs that should inform the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the KM-GBF. IIFB underlines that these inputs also diverse knowledge systems and traditional knowledge covered under Articles HJ, 10C, and other related provisions of the Convention. COP15, by its decision 15/10, decided to convene a 12th meeting of the open-ended working group HJ in November this year to develop a new program of work and to propose institutional arrangements on Article HJ and other provisions of the Convention related to indigenous peoples and local communities. The IIFB therefore proposes to add the words traditional knowledge to the following paragraphs under Section V, recommendations of SBSTA 23/3. Preambular paragraphs 2 and 4 to read as follows, underscoring the critical importance of scientific, technical, and technological inputs, including traditional knowledge, in the review of progress in the implementation of the CBD and the GBF. Recognizing also the role of the SBSTA in providing advice on relevant scientific, technical, and technological matters, including traditional knowledge pertaining to the review of collective progress in the implementation of the framework, including to inform the global review of collective progress. Substantive paragraphs 2 and 4 to read as follows, emphasizes that the global report should draw upon the best available scientific and technical evidence, including traditional knowledge. 4, also decides to establish a scientific and technical advisory group in consultation with the Bureau of the SBSTA to provide scientific, technical, and technological inputs, including traditional knowledge and experts from indigenous peoples and local communities for the preparation of the global report on collective progress in the implementation of the framework, with the terms of reference provided in Annex 2 to the present decision, and that the group shall report to the subsidiary body. IIFB is seeking the support from parties for our proposals to be added to the recommendations under Agenda 3B. IIFB's proposals are supported by the earlier paragraphs contained in SBSTA 23/3, which are contained in our full statement posted in the SBSTA 25 webpage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IPLCs. I will ask if there is party supporting. I see at least 1-2 hands. Thank you very much, the support for these inclusions. Now I'll give the floor to IUCN, followed by women and youth.
Thank you, Chair. The global review of progress must take stock and inform subsequent revisions of national action plans and targets to increase ambition and ultimately support the achievement of the GBF's mission and vision. Chair, the list of the sources of information contained in paragraph 3 of the draft COP recommendation should consider sources for the global review, not only sources for a global report. IUCN invites parties to expand the list of sources of information to include, where relevant and as appropriate, national implementation reports of other multilateral environmental agreements, especially biodiversity-related conventions. Like France, Belgium, Germany, and others, IUCN notes that the contributions from non-state actors are not being explicitly considered. The template for the 7th national report does not provide appropriate space nor guidance to take their actions into account, and their inclusion is optional in the NBSAP template. A global review of collective progress while being party-led would be incomplete without accounting for the contributions of the whole of society. IUCN puts forward its members' contribution for nature platform. It could be an important information source in this respect. Finally, Chair, IUCN suggests that the questions to be answered through the scientific and technical inputs could also be included as an annex in the draft recommendation. Gracias, Presidente.
Muchas gracias, UICN.
Thank you very much. IUCN.
Women, followed by youth.
Thank you, Chair. The Global Biodiversity Progress Report should be rooted in a human rights-based approach, including a gender-responsive perspective and founded on diverse systems of knowledge and values. Just as the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was framed with inclusivity, gender equality, and human rights as core aspects of its implementation, the report should include data on progress on all human rights, gender justice, and social equity aspects of the implementation of the framework in line with Section C. The report should include a human rights perspective and recognize the contribution and voices of Indigenous people, women, youth, and local communities. It should embrace cultural wisdoms and local knowledge, so the sources of information should respect a variety of voices and include culturally sensitive and gender-responsive data. For that, we ask parties' support for the following insertion. Under Section 1, on possible elements of the Global Review of Collective Progress, in Para 10b, in third line, after national contributions, add the following: as well as contribution of Indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth. In the same section, Para 10C, line 6, to add after discussions among parties, to add other governments, right holders, and stakeholders. In the same section, add a new para 10F on collective contributions of Indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth, to recognize those as a key element of the global review. It should be based on a broad variety of information sources, including the local biodiversity outlook. The composition of the scientific and technical advisory group for the Global Biodiversity Progress Report should be based on criteria of inclusivity and self-representation. We explicitly asked for 5 dedicated representatives from IPLCs, women, youth groups within the advisory group. And the criteria used for member selection must encompass a reference to the social and cultural aspect of biodiversity and not only ecological trends. For that, we ask party support for the following insertions. In Annex 2, terms of reference of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Group in paragraph 4 in line 3 after research institution to add the following: and 5 representatives nominated by Indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth groups. And in paragraph 5A to add at the end of it, as well as social and cultural aspects of biodiversity. Finally, sufficient resources must be mobilized to ensure such a holistic and balanced approach to the global report, including for capacity building and supporting the full and effective participation of right holders in this process. We would like the chair to ask party to show support for our considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, representative of women. I would like to see if there are parties supporting the different suggestions. I see at least 2 hands. Thank you very much. And last speaker, representative of youth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We highlight the critical importance of ensuring that the contributions of the collective actions of Indigenous people and local communities, women and youth, are clearly and concretely counted as a key input. We support parties who stated that the global review process must be inclusive and right-based, including by ensuring these perspectives and thus representing diverse knowledge systems are represented in the Scientific and Technical Advisory Group by their own nomination. With this recommendation, to strengthen the role of non-state actors in the global review process, we must be cautious about possibilities of this process being a mechanism for greenwashing and promoting false solutions that don't support the objectives of the convention. Therefore, the global review must ensure for transparency and accountability if it's to consider inputs from business and industry that could hold conflicts of interest. It will be crucial to dedicate enough attention to cover the indirect drivers of biodiversity loss, including economic drivers. This must be applied in approaches to scenarios and modeling for the global review, ensuring that this not simplify trade-offs between environmental, social, and economic aspects. Local biodiversity outlooks provides important perspectives on such pathways and transition, and therefore represent valuable inputs to this process in this regard. In addition to reports of the GEF, including on the Global Biodiversity Framework Plans, we further propose consideration of reports covering domestic, international, public, and private source to sufficiently map volume, allocation, and source of financial resources. Finally, we look forward to persuading work to documenting youth contribution to the targets of the Montreal GBF. We look forward to following the discussion on the global review in shaping our own efforts of the documentation to be as helpful and relevant as possible for this process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your intervention, representative of youth. With this, we finish the list of speakers. So it's been a very rich discussion on many issues. We note some areas of convergence. However, considering the complexity and the importance of this issue, it is not surprising that we also have a range of views that requires further discussion. So after hearing your interventions, I propose to establish a contact group, and the mandate of the contact group will be to discuss the recommendations and also Annex 2 of Document 3, containing the terms of reference of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Group for the preparation of the global report, and the full name. This contact group will be co-chaired by Mr. Gott Boy Hansen from Norway and Mr. Bilal Quishnat from Jordan. The contact group and the time and the venue will be announced in due course. Thank you very much, delegates. With this, we finish our deliberations on 3B. Now we will take up item 3C on approaches to identify scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the framework, including implications for the programs of work of the convention. I now invite the Secretariat to take the floor to introduce item 3C.
Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 8 of Decision 15.4, the Conference of the Parties decided that the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework would be used as a strategic plan for the implementation of the Convention and its protocols, its bodies and its secretariat over the period 2022 to 2030, and that in this regard, the framework should be used to better align and direct the work of the various bodies of the Convention and its protocols, its secretariat, and its budget. In paragraph 9 of the same decision, the Conference of the Parties requested the Executive Secretary to conduct a strategic review and analysis of the programs of work of the Convention in the context of the framework to facilitate its implementation. Similarly, in paragraphs 4 and 5 of Decision 1524, the Conference of the Parties requested the Executive Secretary to develop a strategic review and analysis, respectively, of the Program of Work on Marine and Coastal Biodiversity and the Program of Work on Island Biodiversity in the context of supporting the implementation of the framework. Pursuant to these requests, the Secretariat conducted a rapid analysis of some of the programs of work established under the Convention with respect to the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The rapid analysis is contained in document CBD/Substa/25/INF1. This analysis provided the basis for the findings contained in document CBD/Substa/25/4, which contains a description of the approach, overarching gaps identified through the rapid analysis, and a description of potential approaches to further intersessional work on this issue in advance of the 26th meeting of the subsidiary body. The subsidiary body is invited to consider the draft recommendations provided in the document. In doing so, the subsidiary body may wish to note that further intersessional work is envisaged prior to Substa 26. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Dear colleagues, the rapid analysis prepared by the Secretariat is not intended to be a comprehensive review of all work that has been undertaken under the Convention that may be relevant to the framework, nor is meant to imply that every program of work should have explicit guidance that reflects every element of each of the targets of the framework. Rather, it provides an overview of previous guidance from the COP in these respective program areas that can inform the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and a basis to identify major gaps that may exist across the Convention. Please also note, as set out in the document for this item, it is envisaged that parties and observers will have further opportunities to provide additional inputs on specific programs of work in the intersessional period for further consideration at Substa 26. I therefore urge you to approach this agenda item in this context and to limit your interventions to how we can complement the current programs of work and available, and focusing in how best to use them to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So I open the floor for your views on item 3C. And I start with Canada, followed by Finland and Namibia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, we're very supportive of and eager to analyze and reflect in a very timely manner on how to better align the work of the CBD with the Kunming to Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's already close to the end of 2023, and all of us as parties urgently need guidance as we update our MBSAPs and we start to implement them. In this regard, we'd like to thank the Secretariat for its efforts to get this work started. It is of utmost importance and a high priority from COP15. We agreed at COP15 that the Kunming to Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is the strategic plan of the CBD to 2030 and should drive and refocus all of the CBD's work as needed. Slow progress on many of the Aichi targets has made it clear to us that the status quo has not been good enough. We need to do better this time. This agenda item gives us an opportunity to start focusing on how to better align all of the CBD's work to the KMGBF. Unfortunately, we do not feel that the document before us today or its recommendations accomplishes this. We are eager to work with all of our colleagues here over the next few days in the spirit of COP15 to find a way to accomplish this overall goal. In this regard, Canada will be looking for three things in the SBSTTA recommendation. First of all, the completion of a comprehensive analysis of what gaps and possible redundancies exist when comparing all existing CBD guidance, guidelines, and tools, as well as guidance, guidelines, and tools from other relevant organizations and processes to the KMGBF and its 23 targets, and not to only focus on the CBD's old programs of work. Secondly, the identification of and early action on the most critical gaps where limited guidance exists before COP16 where feasible. For example, even the limited rapid assessment before us today concludes that there is a major gap on the implementation of Target 7 on biodiversity and pollution, just as one example. If parties agree here, should the CBD not be enabled to quickly start its work to fill this gap and not wait until COP16? And thirdly and lastly, highlight to other CBD bodies such as SBSTTA-25, SBI4, the Bureau, and even COP16, the connections of our discussions here under this agenda item with upcoming discussions on the CBD's organization of work, multi-year program of work, programs of work, agendas, secretariat organization, and its budget. This will help us to continue to push for better alignment of the CBD with the priorities of parties as decided in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We will, of course, provide specific suggestions for textual changes to the draft SBSTTA-25 recommendations via email and look forward to further discussions either in a contact group or in the context of a CRP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Canada. Please send your comments to the Secretariat to take into account. Finland. Now I give the floor to Finland, followed by Namibia and Mexico.
Thank you, Chair. Finland thanks the Secretariat for this document, SBSTTA-25/4, including the analysis. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework will require robust implementation, and the programs of work play an important role in guiding the implementation of the targets of the GBF. It's crucial that the Global Biodiversity Framework is implemented at all levels, galvanizing action by governments and throughout the UN system, without and across all levels and sectors and all of society, including the private sector and different stakeholders and IPLCs. To this end, the programs of work are important tools and means for both mainstreaming and implementing biodiversity across all sectors of society and to support parties in implementation. Finland recommends that the program of work have clear objectives that are aligned with the GBF, including activities, updates, timelines, and helping parties and sectors to make progress. And as Canada mentioned, the existing CBD guidance documents needs to be looked at, that their status and their availability instead of duplicating work. Different sectors need different precise proposals on the KMF. Also, the work by other international organizations and processes are important, including the biodiversity-related conventions, the Rio Convention, and they should be fully used. The Bern process is important to strengthen our synergies and to raise our knowledge on implementation. We have also to make use and maximize the co-benefits of the outcomes of the Article 8J work program on indigenous people and local communities. Our additions to the recommendation, which is quite many, by the way, is submitted to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Finland. I'll give the floor to Namibia, followed by Mexico y Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. Namibia is making this submission on behalf of the African region. Africa would like to commend the efforts made by the Executive Secretary for conducting a rapid analysis of the program of work, including the thematic programs covering the major biomes on the planet, as well as the programs addressing the cross-cutting issues. Africa wish to reiterate paragraph 3 of decision 15/4. Chair, the rapid assessment analysis conducted does not fully address the request made by the Conference of Parties. And those request SBSTTA-25 to defer discussions under this item to its 26th SBSTTA meeting to allow the Secretariat to complete the analysis which give us detailed gaps of the current programs of work for the Convention. As we deliberate on the approaches to identify scientific and technical needs for the implementation of this framework, we acknowledge the importance of aligning our efforts with the goals and aspirations set forth in the framework. Our continent, Africa, hosts a wealth of biodiversity, and effective implementation of the framework holds profound significance for our shared global future. Additionally, we would like to encourage the Secretariat to consider reviewing other relevant documents, in particular the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification on Land Degradation Neutrality. Land degradation neutrality in this area is a critical issue that affects both biodiversity and human well-being. To achieve the goals of the Kunming-Montreal GBIF, we must integrate strategies for land restorations, sustainable land management, and land degradation neutrality into our programs of work, especially in dryland regions. In addition, Africa would like to emphasize the needs for connectivity of marine protected area and marine OEACMs as one of the areas requiring further guidance to assist parties in implementing Target 3 of the GBIF. Guidance in this regard will be instrumental in enhancing our efforts to protect and restore biodiversity in these fragile ecosystems. In conclusion, Africa proposed the inclusion of indigenous people and local communities across all programs of work, as they are the holders of traditional knowledge associated with the biomes they reside in and manage. Thus, we propose the addition of point L under paragraph 3, guidance on inclusion of IPLC across all programs of work, and also under paragraph 3B, we propose to include at the end of the sentence and dryland landscapes. We'll submit our contributions in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Namibia, on behalf of the African states. Ahora doy la palabra a México, seguido de
Now Mexico has the floor, and then Colombia, then Mexico, then Turkey. Thank you, Chair. Mexico considers that given the urgency of achieving the results for 2030, we need all efforts possible. We also need to see the work programs properly aligned along with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. As Canada has mentioned, we need activities to be carried out so we can identify the existing gaps. We agree with many of the previous statements, especially regarding the links that exist between the Rio Conventions and other conventions. We should remember here the certification program that was approved. We are also totally committed to the aligning works of these programs. We would like to identify the gaps, help with this, and this is the end of our intervention, and now the rest can intervene. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mexico. I believe it is important to take into account that since 2010, when we adopted the global targets in Aichi, the way in which we work has not been changed nor reviewed, and opening a space in order to change all that work in methodology would be a mammoth task. That was a proposal of the Bureau, and that was precisely to see what those gaps are and see how we could align everything that we have already in existence from different programs in order to align to the new strategic plan. So the option is not to open those work programs, but fine-tuning and what we already had in the convention. So that's why it's important. We need to concentrate and aim our energy at fulfilling the targets and the goals that we have very clear defined in the global framework. I give the floor to Colombia, then Spain, and then Turkey. Thank you, Chairperson. Regarding 3C, the Colombian delegation has the following considerations. Even though updating these working programs have to identify the gaps, the analysis is also related to the inherent issues to each program in order to be updated, like qualitative or quantitative goals within the framework post-2020 and everything that is under its considerations. Of course, we're going to have different themes and that have to be reviewed in view of the last decade advancements in technology. We need to be very explicit and say clearly how we're going to do this work in view of the 26th meeting of the SBSTTA. That is in section 4 of considerations. Only if we do have a clear point of view of how we're going to move forward with decision 15/4, paragraph 9, qualitative methods, areas that are going to work for what was agreed in Montreal. Especially for paragraph 1, Colombia says that we should have MBS mentioned there, and regarding genetically modified organisms has to be there. So we need to include the genetic resources and the byproducts. For paragraph 17, we need to add a reference to intergenerational children and women. For paragraph 20, work programs regarding qualitative and quantitative goals. In point 4, we need to include the spaces that take into account different stakeholders at different levels. We need to use the platforms that are already existent, CHM, GIZEP, the accelerated partnership, in order to report at all time for these units of practice. In item 4, we need to do a gap analysis, but also of the working methods. The detailed methods are here in attached and will be presented in writing to you. So thank you very much, Colombia. If you could please send it to us ASAP. Remember that this document has clearly described how we did the analysis. And Colombia says that we need to identify the most important gaps. And we also have to say that we have clear recommendations so that the Secretariat keeps on working and comes out with a full proposal on how we're going to move forward in view of the next SBSTTA meeting. Thank you so very much for your details and how we can fine-tune from this SBSTTA to the next one. I give the floor now to Spain and then Japan. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Spain makes the following general comments. We consider fundamental importance and we agree regarding the gaps in the scientific and technical guidance for the implementation of the targets in order to be able to assess the possible updating of the relevant programs of work when necessary and in a prioritized manner. We recognize the importance of the programs of work for the conventions, for the achievement of the goals and targets of the global diversity framework. But we also consider other existing forms of guidance, both COP decisions in other areas of work of the conventions and its protocols. We therefore propose that the Secretary undertake a further rapid analysis of the possible general gaps taking into account these cross-cutting issues. We propose some amendments so that in this step-by-step process, the views and suggestions of wide range relevant actors such as indigenous peoples and local communities, IPLCs, are taken into account, along with conventions that are biodiversity related, the Rio Convention and other relevant multilateral agreements, including IPBES and IPCC. Spain is fully aware that there are several requests for guidance development in other draft decisions and considers that it would be useful to obtain an overview of all those requests in a guidance document prior to the SBI-4 or SBI-5 in order to be able to prioritize the development of additional guidance or the updating of existing guidance and taking into account availability of resources. We also wish to highlight the necessary cooperation of the CBD with other multilateral environmental agreements and other actors. Therefore, we suggest including an explicit reference to the Bern process. Finally, Spain suggests that a process be established whereby the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, technological advice and the Conference of the Parties can incorporate the future IPBES requests on additional elements to its work program until 2030, and that the relationship between IPBES and the CBD is considered in line with the IPBES Decision 10 in the implementation of its rolling program of work. We have written to the Secretariat our proposal. Thank you so very much. Thank you very much, Spain, and now Turkey, followed by Japan and then United Kingdom. Turkey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate the analysis of the programs of work and identification of areas that require attention in order to align with the ambitious targets set by the framework. It's important to accept the gaps not only give rise to challenges, but also provide opportunities for innovation and collaboration. We acknowledge that identifying gaps through analysis is an initial step. We also support the recommendations outlined in the document. We want to emphasize our support for the importance of involving all stakeholders throughout the process, including society and the private sector. We need to continue integrating biodiversity considerations into sectors and policies in order to align them with sustainable development goals and other related areas and multilateral environmental agreements. This entails fostering collaboration and coordination across sectors such as agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and urban planning. By adopting integrated approaches across these areas, we can achieve development effectively. Their participation strengthens our efforts and ensures that diverse perspectives are taken into account. Also, it is crucial to incorporate gender approaches and policies into our efforts. Additionally, through the analysis of the programs of work, adopting advancements and innovation in biodiversity conservation is important. Utilizing tools like sensing and big data analysis can greatly enhance our monitoring, research, and decision-making processes, considering analysis of the programs of work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Turkey. Now I'll give the floor to Japan, followed by UK and South Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Japan joins previous speakers and express its appreciation for the efforts made by the Secretariat to conduct rapid analysis of the program of work based on the COP15 decision. Although Japan understands that the rapid analysis is not exhaustive, but the analysis was very useful to identify the gaps and the inconsistencies with the current work at CBD, and they may require significant revisions. On the other hand, as Spain already pointed out, we should be mindful that there has been other relevant guidance developed other than the CBD program of work since the development of the 8th program of works, for example. We should also be mindful that only very limited time is remaining for the implementation of the ambitious GBF. We should promptly update and implement the NBSAPs aligned with the GBF. focused and coordinated efforts to update existing guidance or establish new programs should be kept to a minimum, and they should be limited to something which is necessary to support the implementation of the GBF and achieve targets and goals in each country, as it was mentioned by Canada and Finland. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Japan. So I've been listening that the recognition of the work done by the Secretariat identifying gaps, but also the need to continue to consider existing guidance inside the Convention and outside by other partners, inclusiveness of other sectors, other stakeholders in the way to move forward. I hope this can be properly reflected on the recommendations. Now I'll give the floor to the UK, followed by South Africa and the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The UK would like to thank the Secretariat for the work they have done so far on the rapid analysis of the existing guidance available to support parties implement the KMGBF. This is a hugely important task and one that needs to be given a higher level of priority so that future decisions that may affect the programmes of work and Secretariat activities can be properly informed. We have three overarching points to make. First, we agree with Canada that, as agreed at COP15, the KMGBF is the strategic plan for implementation to 2030, and as such, all activities of the Convention should be aligned with it. This is an opportunity to refocus our priorities and to cut back on any areas that are no longer required. That's not to say we need a lengthy review of the Convention's work history, but there is a balance to be made between assessing what we already have in place and what is needed rapidly to support implementation. Second, we note that the work done so far is partial. If SBSTA is to make effective recommendations to COP16, we need to give the Secretariat a clearer steer on what is required in the second phase of their analysis. This should go beyond identifying gaps in guidance produced under the existing work programmes and consider what new elements may be needed. And finally, I'd like to support the views expressed by Spain. We fully support drawing on the efforts of other organisations to fill the gaps. And in this regard, we would like to see specific proposals on how the assessments produced by IPBES could provide an avenue to generate relevant scientific or technical advice for discussion at SBSTA 26. This would in turn help to inform IPBES 12 in 2025 in deciding on its future assessments. We would also like to see a reference to the role of the Edinburgh process in filling gaps at the sub-national level. We have submitted some short proposals to the Secretariat to reflect these final points. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. Now I'll give the floor to South Africa, followed by Russian Federation and Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa supports the statement made by Namibia on behalf of Africa. We also wish to thank the Executive Secretary for the review. We, however, would like to request a more in-depth review of all existing tools that can support parties to implement the GBF targets. We'd like to propose the establishment of a working group to compile the required guidance to support parties in the implementation of all the GBF targets. The group could also be tasked with the review of all guidance material available rather than only the existing programs of work, followed by collating the most useful resources for parties in a common repository with easy access. This working group could also identify gaps and scope of work required to address these gaps. South Africa would also like to note that one of the findings in the document SBSTA-25/4 is the need for a robust guidance on biodiversity inclusive spatial planning on land. South Africa has already worked on substantial guidance on how to undertake biodiversity inclusive planning on land with UNEP WCMC, funded by the Japanese Biodiversity Fund, in the series Mapping Biodiversity Priorities and Mainstreaming Biodiversity Priorities. We are currently updating this guidance and thus do not see the need for a full program of work. We also would like to draw the attention of parties to the work undertaken by the IUCN and its partners over the past 2 years to prepare detailed technical guidance to implement all the GBF targets for species conservation. The Global Species Action Plan should be reviewed by the recommended working group, and it could be listed as one of the valuable sources of support to parties. Regarding the overarching gaps, in addition to those that are in the document, South Africa would also like to echo the suggestion made by Namibia as part of the Africa Statement that the inclusion of the following concerning the implementation of Target 3 of the GBF, connectivity of marine protected areas and marine OECMs. The motivation for this is that connectivity is one of the qualitative elements of Target 3. But we realize that there is considerably less understanding of ecological connectivity in the marine compared with terrestrial areas and how to measure it in systems of marine conservation areas. A better understanding is essential for the design of marine conservation areas and systems of marine conservation areas, especially considering the potential relevance of this element for climate change resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. We still have a long list of speakers. Let's move on. And I'll give the floor to the Russian Federation, followed by Brazil and Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to be very short. I'll try to be very short because many items which we would like to speak about, they were already commented by other delegations, first of all by Mexico, Namibia, Japan, Canada. We support greatly their comments. I would like to thank the Secretariat for their preparation of a rapid analysis and within many work programs of the convention. We believe in such work programs, and we think that they were and must remain as key elements of realization of objectives and tasks of GBF. We all together put a lot of time and efforts to develop them and to implement them. So let's welcome all more detailed analysis based on the task of the GBF and to start working on identifying existing gaps and perhaps other aspects as regards new or existing working programs. In total, we support such a draft recommendation and as regards the proposal expressed in the paragraph 4 as regards the preparation and organization of further work, including all available tools, not only those contained in this document. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Russian Federation. Now I'll give the floor to Brazil, followed by Switzerland and Germany.
Thank you, Chair. We take note of the rapid analysis on overarching gaps prepared by the Secretariat in order to align the programs of work of the Convention with the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. At the same time, we would like to express our concern regarding the potential implications of introducing 11 new work streams within the Convention. This is a significantly high number of working areas, which may pose additional challenges to developing country delegations, which often struggle to revise all relevant working and information documents. Furthermore, we understand that prior to identifying the need for additional guidance on specific topics, it would be helpful to map and assess the availability of relevant materials across other multilateral environmental agreements and processes to avoid duplication of efforts in line with Decision 15-3. In this regard, we would draw attention to paragraphs 3.E on pollution and 3.J on sustainable consumption, both of which are addressed under specific multilateral processes, such as the BRS conventions, the Global Framework on Chemicals, and the SDG Monitoring Framework for SDG 12, respectively. We would further stress that any additional guidance must maintain coherence with the agreed language under the goals and targets of the KM-GBF. In this regard, we struggle to understand the reference to biome-specific implications under paragraph 3.j, which is not referred to under target 16. In light of those concerns, we would see an added value in a more strategic approach in order to identify key priorities that would benefit from further work. We would therefore favor enhanced work in issues related to biodiversity inclusive land use planning, as proposed under 3.a, marine, coastal, and inland water ecosystems, which have often been underrepresented under CBD discussions, and in issues related to groups in vulnerable situations, in particularly paragraphs 3.f on biodiversity-based products and 3.k on gender considerations. We would encourage the CBD Secretariat to revise their analysis in order to identify which new areas of work related to the 23 targets of the coming Montreal GBF are not already covered by existing programs of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. And also to remind the importance of consistency in the language with goals and targets. Now I'll give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Germany and New Zealand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After the adoption of the KM-GBF last year, we agree with Canada, the UK, and others that there is a need to focus our activities on efficient and effective implementation of the GBF. And for this, we should align our efforts under the CBD and under the other biodiversity-related conventions with the goals and targets of the GBF. In the view of Switzerland, it therefore makes sense to analyze potential gaps and possible duplications in the existing guidances to parties in a comprehensive way and beyond the programs of work of the CBD. Mr. Chair, the proposed rapid analysis under this item is a useful first step, but we consider that more has to be done. As mentioned by Canada and others, Switzerland is of the view that we need a comprehensive overview of all the existing work programs, action plans, guidances that are valuable for the implementation of the KM-GBF. As the framework is a framework for all, including for all other MEAs, we consider it to be important that this work should be done in consultation with the biodiversity-related conventions and other relevant multilateral agreements. As mentioned by Finland and Spain, the Bern process, and in particular the Bern III Conference on Cooperation among Biodiversity-related Conventions for the implementation of the GBF, is well placed to contribute to putting together a comprehensive overview on all relevant existing guidances developed under the biodiversity-related conventions and other relevant multilateral agreements. We will send our suggested changes for the paragraphs 4 and 5 of the proposed recommendations under this item in writing. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Now I'll give the floor to Germany, followed by New Zealand and the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Germany is of the view that the convention should make full use of the knowledge assessed by IPPES. As mentioned before, IPPES will play an important role under agenda item 3b, the global review. Also, approved IPPES products and their impacts for the convention are reflected under agenda item 4. Germany highly welcomes these three assessments and again would like to thank the authors for the outstanding scientific work, incredible dedication and efforts to realize these. However, since there is no forward-looking recommendation for COP16 regarding IPPES, we suggest to deal with this under this agenda item 3c. Germany is of the view that the CBD should elaborate on future requests for the IPPES rolling work program up to 2030 and potentially beyond. Parties of the CBD may also wish to reflect whether it might be good to have a sub-agenda item dedicated to IPPES in the future that covers both the reflection of approved deliverables and forward-looking recommendations for the future work of IPPES. We will hand in our text proposal in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Germany. Now I'll give the floor to Switzerland, followed by European Union and Belgium.
Speaking for New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand considers alignment of the CBD's work program with supporting implementation of the GBF as an important process that is deserving adequate attention. We agree with the views raised by Canada and others on the limitations of the work presented here, and that we should consider how this could be done more comprehensively than is possible based on the rapid assessment we have before us. A more thorough realignment process against the GBF could identify other opportunities for streamlining or efficiencies amongst CBD work programs, as well as the way we work. We note, for example, some similar work has been undertaken within the context of the Sustainable Wildlife Management agenda item, and query whether it makes sense to integrate consideration of potential areas for complementary guidance identified there within a more comprehensive process. We're also mindful that while it is important this work includes efficiencies and coordination across MEAs, many organisations and processes outside the MEA system hold important mandates for managing sectors with responsibilities related to the drivers of biodiversity loss. For guidance and tools to support implementation of the GBF to hold the necessary weight and influence within these organisations, we could consider tasking the Secretariat with exploring opportunities for joint initiatives or collaboration mechanisms for work in areas of mutual interest and priority. Finally, in delivering this work, we consider we should be seeking the views and contributions of representatives of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and would support reflecting this in our recommendations. This work should also take into consideration the contribution of different knowledge systems, including traditional knowledge, noting the relevance of these for many, if not all, targets. We would be keen to work alongside the other delegations on possible revisions to the recommendations on this agenda item, and we'll be happy to provide text on our more specific suggestions to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. Now I'll give the floor to EU, followed by Belgium and Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The European Union would like to thank the CBD Secretariat for the rapid assessment of gaps, which is useful as a first step. We support the proposed request to the CBD Secretariat to seek views on how to address the gaps. This complements the original request in the COP15 decision for a strategic review and analysis of the program of work, which hasn't yet been completed. For the European Union, two key questions remain. Which of the identified scientific gaps and lack of guidance are crucial for ensuring the full implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and how to fill these gaps? For many elements of the goals and targets, the problem may reside elsewhere, such as lack of funding, capacity building on knowledge, limited political support for implementation, etc. Guidance is just one of the tools we have and not necessarily the strongest tool. We need a broader assessment of the bottlenecks for implementation to prioritize the work under the Convention, including, but not only, on what could usefully be done under the revised work programs. We look forward to discuss this at the 4th meeting of SBI. We support the changes proposed in the draft recommendation from the Ville report and will provide them in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Yu. Now I'll give the floor to Belgium, Argentina, and 164, which is South Sudan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Belgium agrees with the interventions from several parties, such as Canada, Finland, Namibia, Spain, and many others, to not just do a rapid analysis of the gaps on the programs of work mentioned in the document SBSTTA-25/4, but also on the other cross-cutting programs of work of the Convention. We also agree with them on the importance to work together with other MEAs in this effect, among which through the Bern process, as well as with international organizations, as mentioned by New Zealand. As mentioned by Spain, there may be future CBD decisions that might ask for the development of guidance or updating of existing guidance, as we already see in document SBSTTA-25/12. We agree that there should be an additional paragraph requesting the Secretariat to compile a full list of requests for the developing or updating of guidance for COP16 in order to be able to prioritize the development and updating of guidance, taking into account gaps and the availability of resources. We will submit our proposals in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium. Ahora doy la palabra a Argentina, seguido de South Sudan.
Now, Argentina has the floor, then South Sudan, and then Costa Rica. Thank you, Chair. Argentina agrees with the importance of the programs of work on the Convention of Biological Diversity, as well as with the decisions of the Convention on Biological Diversity, as well as related decisions and other areas of work in the context of the Convention to support the work programs of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And we thank the Secretariat for the preparation of a rapid analysis and the programs of work. Argentina considers it important to identify the general gaps in the Convention's work program and particularly supports the guidance on sustainable activities, products and services based on biodiversity. Also would like to see gender equality taken into consideration. This is with regards to Target 23. Argentina considers that the resource mobilization is a fundamental condition for the implementation of the global framework and a cross-cutting theme in the work programs. For this reason, and taking into account the rapid analysis of the programs of work, Argentina suggests the inclusion in the list of general gaps of the item guidance on resource mobilization, guidance on resource mobilization for selected biomes and thematic issues, Target 19. We also consider it necessary to avoid overburdening deliberations and duplication of work with a mandate to do so. This is why we suggest to reduce the above-mentioned list by deleting items 3C, I, J from the draft recommendations. We also take note of the intention to invite relevant international organizations to contribute to the work and suggest a compilation of the results to be made for Substat 26. Finally, we consider that the updating of work programs should take into account national priorities, capacities, and the needs of the parties, taking into account their national legislation. We will submit in writing our proposals for amendments. Thank you very much. Thank you, Argentina. Now, South Sudan has the floor.
South Sudan aligned itself with the statement made by Namibia on behalf of Africa and applauds the work of the Secretariat. Looking at the recommendations made and the important role to be played by the program of work of the Convention in guiding the implementation of the GBF, efforts should be exerted to have a thorough and complete analysis of the gaps within each program of work to guide parties in implementing the GBF. South Sudan supports the request to allow more time for the Secretariat to complete analysis through the proposed intersessional work on the individual programs of work, which is expected to give detailed gaps in the current program of work of the conventions and how best to address the gaps by involving the state and non-state actors to better implement the GBF. Lastly, Chair, in conducting the intersessional work and consultations on the individual programs, technological challenges, especially with the online platform, should be considered and managed through blended mode of interactions, including face-to-face meetings, depending on availability of resources. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Sudan. I'll give the floor to Costa Rica, followed by Kenya and Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Costa Rica appreciates the review carried out by the Secretariat, but within a greater depth and guidance is definitely required. And as it has been mentioned by Canada and other countries, we believe that is necessary an exhaustive review of agendas, work programs, budgets, and even a review of human resources arrangements. It seems to us that there are work programs that require particular analysis since they were agreed upon under another historical context. This review of the Convention's programs is necessary not only for a coming Montreal strategic framework, but for the CBD to fully adjust to the new biodiversity threats and technology opportunities. We are not sure to use the term gaps in the document because it means that there is no technical information We prefer to use another terms as integration spaces or something like that, because we are not sure that there is no information in those gaps. The document requires to be reviewed from different approach to have an adequate recommendation for COP15, and Costa Rica is willing to participate in the analysis of the document. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Costa Rica.
Thank you, Costa Rica. Now Kenya has the floor, then Bosnia-Herzegovina, then Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya aligns with Namibia's position on behalf of African states and also agrees with other parties that there are gaps relating to main elements of certain targets. And we specifically want to highlight Target 3, which may be addressed by revising and updating existing guidance documents. A case in point is Decision 14.8 Annex 2 on guidance on effective and equitable governance for protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures. The rapid analysis did not reference this existing guidance that was developed for Aichi Target 11. While the existing guidance may not be adequate for the GBF, the existence of such guidance needs to be noted and where needed, revised, updated, and as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'll give the floor to Bosnia-Herzegovina, followed by Australia and FAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bosnia and Herzegovina welcomes the work of the Secretariat on the rapid analysis to identify scientific and technical needs of parties for the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal framework. All the provided findings in the document are highly informative, which is why we generally support proposed guidance. According to the available guidance and decisions, it is clear that CBD has well-established foundations for the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. However, we would like to reiterate that the Kunming-Montreal Framework in the Section C lists a number of approaches that should be considered in implementing the framework. Going back to the detailed discussions on this issue, we believe that now is the right time to also consider elements in the Section C of the framework. We notice that the current work programs, existing decisions, as well as the work of the other multilateral bodies do not contain enough guidance for two approaches in the implementation of the framework, namely all of the government and all of the society approach, and the second, formal and informal education. We are aware that the mainstreaming is one part of the all of the government approach, but we believe it is not completely covered. However, mainstreaming is not a part of all of society approach. We believe it is necessary to better support parties in integrated approach of a society in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework at the national level. From other side, although we all understand that education is one of rare long-term tools for achievement of living in harmony with nature, we believe that less attention and support is given to despite the work of this convention. Therefore, we suggest to add guidance for all of government and all of a society approach and formal and informal education to the list in document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Australia, followed by FAO and NGOs 239.
Thank you, Chair. Parties agreed at COP15 that the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework should be used as the strategic plan for the implementation of the Convention and its protocols, its bodies and its secretariat over the period of 2022 to 2030. And the framework should be used to better align and direct the work of the various bodies of the Convention and its protocols and its budget according to the goals and targets of the framework. In agreeing to the KMGBF, parties acknowledge that we should no longer continue with business as usual. We need to do more. This includes at home through our national and regional efforts, but it also needs to be through the efforts when we come together under the Convention. We need to assess the Convention's current effort and operations against the framework beyond the current rapid assessment to determine where there is sufficient guidance and support and where there are gaps to guide how we need to realign, refocus and adapt our collective efforts to support the framework's implementation. We recognise, as others have mentioned today, that there are elements of the framework which have been underrepresented in our efforts to date. Australia, like Canada, Finland, Japan, Switzerland and many others, consider a more comprehensive analysis would support this pursuit. Starting with the framework as a strategic plan and comparing this against the full suite of current CBD guidance, guidelines and tools, but also others available from other relevant fora to clearly identify where there are gaps to be filled, where there are opportunities to realign work, leverage the efforts of others to reduce duplication, and perhaps where work is no longer needed, thereby freeing up resources to focus on priority areas, noting that resources are not limitless. That way we can focus our efforts on where they can best be used to support effective KM-GBF implementation. To this end, Australia supports the proposed text amendments put forward by Canada. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. I now give the floor to Malawi. So I have a party, followed by FAO.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi thank the Secretariat for the document indicating the rapid assessment of the guidance documents under the program of works that exist and their gaps. Malawi support the statement made by Namibia on behalf of the African group. The rapid analysis has been very informative. For some of the guidance documents that did not undergo rapid review of the guidance document outlined in Para 11, like guidance document for targets 13, 17, and 20, among others, it would have been useful not just to take note of their existence, but also to assess their sufficiency and appropriateness to the GBF. That is why we welcome paragraph 4 of the draft recommendation, but that the intersessional work should also consider the reviewing the sufficiency, effectiveness, and appropriateness to the GBF of the existing guidance document. We recognize that although the guidance document may not be available under the CBD, related guidance document could be available elsewhere in other multilateral processes, and hence we would like to support paragraph 5 of the draft recommendation in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. Now I'll give the floor to FAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This statement refers to paragraph 19 of document 25/4, where it is mentioned that guidance produced by international organizations could help to address some of the gaps noted in the document. To support the implementation of its mandate to end hunger and malnutrition across the globe through sustainable agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and aquaculture, FAO has developed numerous forms of guidance that are relevant to many of the targets of the KM-GBF. More than half of the targets of the framework are directly related to agri-food sectors in one way or another. There's policy and technical tools that are available to support country efforts to implement the frameworks, include standards, guidelines, accounting and monitoring tools, code of conduct, and other normative instruments. FAO will soon launch, before the end of the year, its Biodiversity Knowledge Hub to facilitate access to more than 300 tools and instruments that are relevant to one or more targets of the framework. As the framework cannot be achieved without the active engagement of the agri-food sector, FAO will continue to support countries to fill the gaps related to agri-food system in the update and implementation of the NBSAPs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, FAO. So we are looking as a first stop the gaps in the gap analysis. We're looking inside the convention what we have, And also we're looking outside the convention, what is useful around to help us to fill these gaps. Thank you, FAO. And now to finish with observers, and we have very limited time and decide how to go, I will give the floor to IUCN, followed by IPLCs and Ramsar.
Thank you, Chair. IUCN supports the proposed approach for updating, as practically needed and in a strategic manner, the programs of work of the Convention. IUCN recommends that if updated, the programs of work establish clear objectives aligned with the GBF, include concrete activities, updated timelines, and periodic revisions of progress. This exercise should support GBF implementation, not delay action. As many parties, IUCN strongly supports inviting inputs from relevant international organizations and other stakeholders to identify and address gaps in the programs of work, to, among others, avoid duplication and leverage synergies. IUCN stands ready to actively engage in this effort. Chair, in the absence of a dedicated program of work on species conservation and given the weak progress on Aichi Target 12, IUCN invites parties to use the Global Species Action Plan as key guidance to integrate species conservation across the GBF and enhance implementation of species-related targets, as already mentioned by South Africa. The GSAP has been developed by IUCN, its members, commissions, and partners in consultation with the secretariats of the biodiversity-related conventions and sets out key strategic interventions and actions for the conservation and sustainable use of species in all GBF targets. Gracias, Presidente.
Muchas gracias. Ahora doy la palabra al representante de
Thank you very much. Now, ILPC has the floor. Sí.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This statement is made on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. The IFB notes that the rapid analysis did not identify all gaps and support the need for additional analysis in the future. The IFB would like to highlight that there is an upcoming meeting of the Ad Hoc Working Group on Article 8J and related provisions in November 2023, and recommendations arising from there will be useful in the continuing gap analysis. In regards to the current assessment of gaps in needs, we have additional suggestions for guidances. Our specific text suggestions is as follows. In paragraph 3, to insert the words including those after the word gaps, and to add to the list of guidances suggested the following. First, guidance on respect for the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities and on equitable governance, which is relevant to Target 3. Next, guidance on the application of a human rights-based approach to biodiversity policy and actions, which is relevant to all targets. And last, guidance on assessing the role of collective actions and non-market-based approaches to resource mobilization, which is relevant to Target 19. In paragraph 4, we would like to insert including indigenous peoples and local communities after the word stakeholders. Furthermore, we would also like to support the proposal by Namibia on behalf of Africa countries in engaging or including IPLCs across all programs of work. We ask for party support for our proposals. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, representative of IPLCs. So I would like to know if there are parties supporting the language suggested by the representative of IPLCs. I see some hands. Thank you very much. There is support. Now I'll give the floor to Ramsar.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat of the Convention on Wetlands welcomes the initial rapid analysis of CBD programs of work with respect to the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework contained in document 25 INF 1. We note the proposed approach to intersessional work on the individual programs of work presented in document 25-4, as well as the many suggestions by parties raised in interventions under this agenda item. As lead partner on wetlands for the CBD, we stand ready to co-lead with the CBD Secretariat efforts in relation to the program of work on inland waters biodiversity and to contribute towards other programs of work where relevant, including, of course, the program of work on marine and coastal biodiversity. In this context, I also note that with the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the Secretariats of the CBD and the Convention on Wetlands continue preparation of their 6th joint work plan in line with decisions of governing bodies of both conventions and building on the review of the 5th joint work plan conducted in 2021. The final joint work plan will be presented to the SBI meeting in May 2024 and the Convention on Wetlands Standing Committee at its meeting in June 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ramsars. Now I'll give the floor to Representative of Women, 270.
Thanks, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the UNCBD Women's Caucus. We welcome the recognition that there is a need for guidance on addressing gender considerations in the context of various biomes and thematic issues, but those are not the only elements that should be addressed in order to provide parties with enough elements, tools, and information to implement Target 23 fully and the Gender Plan of Action, which should be noted was not included in this rapid review. We recommend that scientific and technical input on other gaps of knowledge, capacity, and data regarding gender dynamics beyond just agriculture, protected areas, or biomes should be integrated into the guidance to be developed to address the overarching gaps mentioned in Para 17. Parties can greatly benefit from comprehensive guidance and support to ensure a more successful implementation of both Target 23 and the Gender Plan of Action. For that, the CBD Women's Caucus is in position to collaborate. Furthermore, Section C introduces new principles related to human rights-based approach and the right to a healthy environment, and there are several other innovative elements within the targets for which there is guidance and technical support that must be developed and provided. We encourage parties to put emphasis on closing these knowledge and capacity gaps to ease and strengthen their implementation of the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to NGO. It's 239.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of a group of international NGOs. Species are fundamental units of biodiversity and the building blocks of ecosystems. To deliver for species will require dedicated resourcing, technical and financial, to support countries' implementation of the species-related actions. While species are included in the current programs of work, this is piecemeal. To ensure coordinated action on species and to generate the momentum required to prevent extinctions and reduce extinction risk, we consider a species program of work as an essential. We look to parties for their support for the consideration of this substantive program of work. We have text suggestions which we will submit in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Can you give us an idea of what is the nature of this concrete text that you are suggesting? I'm referring to the previous speaker, so parties can have a more clear idea what is the type, because
Should I explain, Chair? Or is the other speaker?
It was intervention of international NGOs, right? The previous speaker, but says that we'll deliver a text with proposed amendments, but we need to have more clarity of what is exactly what you are suggesting so parties can be aware and if they are in the position to support, because it's not clear.
Thank you, Chair. The specific text relates to the recommendations in paragraph 4 and a new paragraph 6. So in paragraph 4, it would read, requests the Executive Secretary, building on the results of the rapid analysis, through notifications, online meetings, webinars, or online discussion forums subject to the availability of resources, comma instead of a full stop, including but not limited to how to address the gaps noted in paragraph 3 above, end, continue to the end of the paragraph, that is. And then paragraph 6 would read, requests further consideration is given to ensure the full alignment of the current programs of work in delivering the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in a holistic manner and consider where new programs of work could concretely add value to its implementation. So there's no specific text on a species program of work as such, but just an opportunity to consider that such a program or other programs might be useful in the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I would like to know if, based on what you just heard, if there's any party supporting this suggestion. Please raise your hand. I don't see anyone. Thank you very much. I see one. Okay. You are supporting. It's Grenada. Now I'm going to give the floor to 176. It says reserve, but we know that it's Iraq. A party.
تحية طيبة. أولاً قبل البدء أود التعبير عن شكر.
Before starting, I want to thank all the organizers for this important event, speaking about to determine the technical scientific needs to implement the framework. We understand it requires to determine all gaps that resulted from the GBF CBD, especially in wars and crises all over the world, and are affecting the implementation of international conventions to implement the SDGs in general and the CBD especially. And this requires also a multi-diverse analysis and in details before to generalize the successful experiences and to learn lessons in order to determine the opportunities and determine the points of weakness and strength. Thank you.
So with this, we close the deliberations on this agenda item, and we need to define the way to proceed. There's a number of interventions recognizing the importance of this gap analysis as a first step, and there were some recommendations, some suggestions for the recommendations. I don't believe we need to establish a contact group on this. I will ask the Secretariat to take a look on the different comments and based on this to prepare a CRP. Otherwise, it's going to be too many contact groups and we still have more documents to revise that probably will require. So I hope, please be sure to in the next hour to send your submissions with clarity about where do you want to have some amendments on the recommendation in how to proceed, in understanding that this is just the first step and the Secretariat will work to propose a way forward to continue the analysis to know what are the major gaps, what do we have already in the convention, what can we find outside in order to support the implementation of the framework. So I asked the Secretariat to prepare a CRP, and we will revise that later. Just give me 1 second in order to know how long we have. We can extend this session if we can also address the next agenda item. Just give me 1 second. Okay, in order to continue with our ambitious agenda, I propose to work for half an hour more to cover agenda item 3D, So hopefully we can finish or at least have important progress in order to allow my colleague Marina from Finland to chair tomorrow. The package is an ambitious package also of documents on IPBES assessments and IPCC, to do that all in the morning tomorrow. So let's move to agenda item 3D on plant conservation. Before I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce this item, we will have a presentation from Ms. Maite Delmas, co-chair of the Global Partnership on Plant Conservation, who will speak to us about the set of complementary actions related to plant conservation to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Ms. Delmas, are you around? Yes. We also had a side event during lunch on this matter. You have the floor. Microphone to Pont.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous donner un bref.
It's an honor for me to show you a brief overview of what has been proposed to this meeting as a complementary measures in support of the GBF. We thank the Secretariat of the Convention for the implementation.
Maintain silence in order to listen to the presentation of our colleague on plant conservation. Thank you very much. Please continue. If you can get closer to the microphone, it would be better.
Okay. Nous remercions également.
We also thank many parties and members of the partnership for their contribution and precious advice. The strategy for plant conservation was a catalyst and a very efficient catalyst to mobilize us and mobilize botanic communities by stimulating numerous actions worldwide at also local and regional level. It provided a flexible, comprehensive framework to enable national strategies for plant conservation in many countries, including biodiversity-rich countries. By elaborating this strategy, COP recognized the essential role in the resilience of ecosystems, the providing of ecosystemic services, the adaptation to climate change challenges and the mitigation of those challenges, as well as for the mankind well-being. Substantial progress has been made in the achieving those goals, and those progresses have been well described in reports for plant preservation and were displayed during the Biodiversity Convention. Over the past 2 decades, the plant conservation strategies has been supported by the World Partnership for Plant Conservation, created in 2004, created during COP7 within a decision that provisioned the implementation of a flexible organization. Today, it has 70 institutions and organizations worldwide that support the parties in the implementation of the IMCP. Focal national points for strategy also complement this strategy. The last strategy of the partnership was held in the South African Institution for Biodiversity to overview the advancements. Elaboration of the post-2020 advancement was supported by many parties, especially during informal meetings and international meetings and consultations that were held in China in 2019 and 2018. OZ24 recommended that this could take the form of complementary recommendations for COP invited us to implement a series of measures for plant conservation. So those 35 measures that we propose are aligned on the World Global Framework targets. Each of these measures will be implemented, taking into account the CDB means while sharing gender equality. Measures include restoration of ecosystems, of species, and genetic diversity, the use of diversity of vegetal species in rationalization of territories, the use of indigenous knowledge for carbon we proposed measures to satisfy the needs of the population due to refer to the improvement of livelihoods thanks to wild species. Initiatives to sustain efforts of local communities to preserve traditional knowledge and traditional practices in terms of plant conservation and sustainable use of vegetal diversity, using the traditional and cultural use of those resources, development of green accessible resources, biodiversity rich in urban zones, with green programs and community gardening activities. Then support nutrition, livelihoods, and welfare. Regarding the tools and solutions for implementation and integration, we propose development, disseminating in all countries of an exhaustive info report. Online information systems, inventories, and biological development of individual capacities and institutional capacities, sharing resources and networking, and the engagement of the public to preserve and support plant preservation. Also, an information document was provided for this meeting presenting the technical justifications of each of these additional measures, as well as way to measure the progresses. This is all based on priorities and action based on preserving vegetal species, which have been taught during the various meetings.
Des leçons tirées lors de la mise en œuvre des phases précédentes de la stratégie par les communautés botaniques et de la conservation des plantes. Elles seront régulièrement mises à jour.
They will be regularly updated. Measures recognize the importance of vegetal species and their roles as a structural factor of ecosystems and their socio-economic importance. The Global Partnership for Plant Preservation and its members is happy to reiterate their support to the strategy of implementation for plant preservation. We are happy to continue to help parties to support plant conservation for the years to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Delmas, for this presentation. Now I invite the Secretariat to take the floor to introduce item 3D.
Thank you, Chair. For item 3D, the Secretariat, with major inputs from the Global Partnership on Plant Conservation, as just described, prepared document Substa/25/5, which contains a set of complementary actions related to plant conservation to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The document was prepared pursuant to decisions 15.5 and 15.13. The subsidiary body is invited to consider the draft recommendations provided in the document. In addition, the subsidiary body also has before it information document Substa/25/Inf4, which contains information on technical rationales for each of the proposed complementary actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have the document with the concrete set of complementary actions. So I open the floor on your views on item 3D. Let's start with Canada, followed by Spain and Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Canada appreciates the work of the Global Partnership for Plant Conservation and Botanic Gardens Conservation International in preparing the proposed set of complementary actions to support implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We note that COP15 requested that a set of complementary actions related to plant conservation be developed to support implementation of the KMGBF for consideration by Substa. Canada can support these actions provided they are voluntary in nature and do not impose any additional reporting or accountability obligations for parties. The focus of national reporting should be on the KMGBF, and inclusion of any complementary actions in national reports should be done on a voluntary basis. Canada suggests the addition of the term voluntary in the title of the annex and in various paragraphs of the draft decision, which we will submit in writing. Canada will propose some changes to various paragraphs in the annex to align with terminology used in the CBD, IPBES, and the KMGBF. Paras 6A and 6B of the annex should align with the language used in IPBES and in Target 6 of the KMGBF related to the management and eradication of invasive alien species. Canada will also propose changes to paragraph 11 to ensure that it is referring to increasing the sustainable management of existing areas under key productive sectors use, noting that increasing sustainably managed land is not necessarily better for biodiversity than leaving areas unmanaged. Canada further suggests that the references to Indigenous and local knowledge be replaced with traditional knowledge to align with language used in Article 8J of the Convention. We will submit our changes in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Please submit this in writing, and thank you for highlighting that these are voluntary actions, complementary actions to that can also facilitate the adoption, and also to remind that this annex with the complementary actions also passed through a peer review process. So it's been revised. So we are not departing from zero for taking into account in your interventions. Now I'll give the floor to España, followed by Indonesia and Sweden.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente, y muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the partnership, for the work carried out, and for this presentation. Spain recognises the relevance of the global strategy for plant conservation and therefore welcome and value positively the update of complementary actions for the subsequent period beyond 2020. However, we would like to clarify and specify some of the actions. At national level, national target reports should include progress made in achieving this set of complementary actions. In this respect, it would be helpful to provide indications for monitoring these actions using the monitoring framework of the global biodiversity. The conservation of genetic diversity should include an explicit mention of crops, their wild relatives, and other species of value, and other species of socioeconomic value in the in situ and ex situ conservation, Action 4D. For wild species, we should identify sustainable harvest levels, Action 5A, and include species that are likely to be threatened in the future, Action 5B. Strategies and programs aimed at improving biodiversity, ecosystem services, and connectivity in cities should incentivize the use of native climate-resilient species, including in interventions in blue spaces such as rivers and urban wetlands, Action 12. It is important to include different traditional knowledge systems, innovations, practices, and technologies for the traditional knowledge systems for plant conservation, recognizing the role of women as holders of essential knowledge for plant conservation. That's Action 21. We will be submitting in writing our detailed proposal. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Spain.
Chair, followed by Sweden and the UK.
Okay, thank you. Indonesian comment and welcome the work of the GSPC in preparing a set of complementary action related to the implementation of KMGPF. However, it is worth noting that the 20,000 GSPC plan conservation report show that several quantitative targets were not achieved. Therefore, Indonesia sees the need to reassess and consider the GSPC target adopted by the KMGPF, particularly on their feasibility. Regarding the strategy for land conservation in the annex document Substa/15/5 on target 4, we are hoping that collection and conservation of plant genome that are also covered within the terminology of conservation of plant genetic diversity. We consider these to be crucial as safeguard in case of the loss of physical specimen of plant species or extinction. We are suggest that seed bank and germ-place collection also be included within the coverage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Terima kasih, Indonesia. Now we'll give the floor to Sweden, followed by UK and Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sweden welcomes a set of complementary actions related to plant conservation to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Sweden is of the view that the global strategy for plant conservation is still relevant and well established among relevant actors. The strategy should not be replaced by a set of complementary actions, and therefore it is proposed to not refer to an update of the strategy only, but always to a set of complementary actions as an update to the strategy. Sweden has only a few proposals for text amendments in the recommendation and in the set of complementary actions. We are, for example, of the view that the level of ambition could be increased in the actions 1 and 4b, that the role of genetic diversity can be strengthened across the set of actions, that wording regarding monitoring need to be adjusted, and that the language regarding invasive alien species in actions 6 and 8, as well as regarding the use of climate-resilient species in actions 11 and 12, can be improved. Further, we support a new action under Action 15 on the provision of information to promote sustainable consumption practices in plant use. We will provide concrete text proposals in an annex to the statement and would like to underline that it is our ambition to support a recommendation to COP16 for the adoption of the set of complementary actions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sudi. I'll give the floor to UK, followed by Colombia and Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The UK would like to thank the Global Partnership for Plant Conservation and the Secretariat for producing the set of complementary actions related to plant conservation to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Plants are the basis of all life on Earth and the building blocks of our ecosystems. Therefore, the conservation of plants is essential if we are to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and meet the goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Previous frameworks to focus action on plants have been helpful to advance and promote plant conservation measures. Like Canada, we support these complementary actions as a voluntary and flexible framework, which can help guide parties regarding the specific actions they may want to take in relation to plants when implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework. Given the importance of plant conservation for biodiversity, and also noting the voluntary nature of these actions, we can support the set of complementary actions as drafted in the annex to document 25/5. We suggest that we do not have the time to negotiate line by line these complementary actions in the same way we did negotiate the goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. However, if the annex is to be open for discussion, we will be ready to engage and will propose amendments to help clarify some of these actions and better align them with the Global Biodiversity Framework. With regards to the draft decision itself, like Sweden, we suggest that it should be clarified that parties are agreeing a set of voluntary complementary actions for plants and not adopting an updated global plant strategy for conservation. We also suggest highlighting in the draft decision that these actions, where applicable, should cover inland waters and marine environments as well, and not just terrestrial plants. We have submitted our proposed amendments in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, UK, and thank you for those precisions. Now I'll give the floor to Colombia, followed by Germany.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. Representing Colombia, I would like to put forward the following considerations. First, regarding the complementary actions proposed, we think that it's important to say that Colombia has published all information available regarding foraneous plants. We think this information could be very helpful at a global level. We have also started to work on a strategy for native species. This has been carried out at a local level with local communities, with indigenous peoples, as they have important knowledge. These works have been done in accordance with and in agreement with local authorities and with the communities that live in the region. Colombia is also updating their national plan for the introduction of exotic species, and this is being implemented at a national level. We also want to support further strengthening of financing mechanisms. We think this is necessary to further develop different methodologies to be able to identify risks, especially risks that have to do with trading. We also would like to see more control regarding the trading of foraneous or exotic species. We'd also like to know what the consequences are regarding social, cultural, and economic systems when these species are introduced within the country. Colombia would also like to underline that this work is urgent, especially if we want to re-establish different biodiverse areas. We need to put a stop to the loss that is happening. With this, we will be able to help with the implementation of the global framework, especially when we are talking about protecting plants. Thank you, Colombia. Please remember that I asked you to focus on the concrete changes proposed on the annex. Right. We only have 2 more minutes till 1:30. So I'll give the floor to Germany and then to the Secretariat in case they have any announcements before closing this afternoon session. Germany has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We recognize that plants as primary producers play a central role in the Earth ecosystems. They form the largest part of the biomass, they shape terrestrial landscapes and habitats, and at the same time, they are the basis of human life and well-being. We therefore cannot ignore the fact that plant life is under serious threat and that considerable efforts must be made to halt the loss of plant species and diversity. Germany likes to underline the great importance of the GSPC as a driving force and supporting tool for plant conservation over the past 2 decades. We now fully support to integrate the update of the GSPC within the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We are convinced that the complementary actions are necessary and suitable to provide new impetus and opportunities for achieving the GBF goals in terms of plant conservation, sustainable use, and fair benefit sharing in the post-2020 period, even in the face of global change. We affirm that plant conservation, as well as climate mitigation and adaptation, require harmonized approaches. We strongly appreciate that the priority use of native species in response to the challenges of ecological restoration and climate mitigation is clearly expressed in the update. We also appreciate that the conservation of the genetic diversity of species should also be ensured through in situ and ex situ programs. We will hand in some comments in writing. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Germany. So with this, we finish interventions for this afternoon night session. We still have a long list of speakers. I will name them to continue when we recommend on this topic. Is Switzerland, Japan, Mexico, EU, Brazil, Argentina, Belgium, Costa Rica, Kenya on behalf of Africa. Then I will move it before. South Africa and Uganda. So far is the list, so we will continue in the next session. I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat if there are any message before closing.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight was originally scheduled for the reception of Substar and also for the 20 years anniversary for the Cartagena Protocol. But with the desire that we want to have a more combined reception with also CAP, the reception is postponed now to the evening of 19 October on Thursday. So we'll inform again the venue and more specific timing later. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And with this, we finish our deliberations for today. And I thank the interpreters for the extension for half an hour more than we originally scheduled, and with this, the meeting is adjourned.